final countdown in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour 2021 and in the Aimchess US Rapids. Disconnection and nervousness ruined the first day in the final for Vladislav Artemiev. He now has to win the second match against a world champion playing some fantastic chess. Magnus Carlsen could take a big leap towards winning the tour overall if he is victorious today. But first we play, so welcome to the final day of the Aimchess US Rapid. An early applause from Wesley So to the winner of the Aimchess US Rapid. It's gonna be either Magnus Carlsen or Vladislav Artemiev. Welcome everyone to the final day of this tournament. It is the 9th regular event in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour, the last event before the big $300,000 tour final. 40 points is at stake for these two players today, and to take us through the final day, Women's Grandmaster and International Master Houska and Grandmaster David Howell. And David, it's day number 81 in the studio, actually. What do you expect from the final day?
81 days, that's a lot of chess, and I expect to see more of the same, which has been fireworks throughout the tour. It's been that way. We've never seen a dull final, and I think Artemiev, he's going to light things up today by throwing everything at the world champion.
Yeah, Ivanka, thinking back to the 8 previous finals, what do you expect? What are these days usually like?
Oh, they're really intense. Yeah. I mean, there's no other word for it. Normally, we see someone who has their back up against their wall, who are struggling for survival. And like David says, the action tends to be super intense. And that's exactly what Artemiev has to do today. He has to play fast. He has to play in a furious style.
Let's hope he does. Magnus Carlsen has won 2 tournaments so far in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour. For Artemiev, this is his second final in the tour, but facing the world champion, nerves were definitely a big factor for the Russian on the first day.
He's brought his queen out now, so he's 2 pawns down as black. But look at these 2 pieces. They are extremely strong, and they're the best attacking combo, remember, queen and knight together. And now white queen has fallen. White gained 2 rooks in the process, but look at the white king. Without the white queen, how are you going to defend it? That king looks so vulnerable. And checkmate comes. Artemiev resigns.
Wow, what a start to the final, you guys.
On the first day of the Aimchess US Rapid Finals, there was a dramatic exchange of blows between Carlsen and Artemiev, resulting in 2 wins for the Norwegian. But an unfortunate blunder by the world champion gave the Russian a chance to strike back in Game 3.
Okay, he's actually giving up a pawn, dropping his queen back. Okay, so there's tension between the queens.
Bar does not like Magnus's decision. Oh!
Magnus just suddenly reacting. I'm trying to understand. He's given up a pawn.
He is shocked, Magnus Carlsen.
This was a mouse slip.
Was it a mouse slip? No winning chances at all for Magnus.
No.
It's purely backs to the wall, all-out defense, and he'll need every ounce of that world championship magic.
Magnus resigns.
Wow, what a comeback by Vladislav Artemiev.
Okay, matter of time, matter of moments, and Artemiev laughing, smiling there. He knows it's about to be a draw on the board. Will he offer that draw himself?
Yes.
No, he just eliminates everything, and it's king versus king. That's very drawn.
That means Vladislav Artemiev, he loses the first match in the final. Magnus Carlsen is the winner.
A little bit so-so. I thought I put the queen back, and I kept thinking. And I mean, I think I sat there for like a minute before I realized that I'd actually put the queen on the wrong square. I was thinking, and then, I noticed all of a sudden that it was his move, and shocked by that.
It was a great start to the final for Magnus Carlsen, with the black pieces winning Game 1. And then it was that crucial and dramatic second game. Artemiev disconnected. He lost also Game 2, but making a comeback in Game 3. Artemiev, the last game though, it was a draw, and that means Magnus Carlsen, he won the first match in the final. And were you impressed, David, with the world champions play yesterday?
In general, yes. Magnus Of course, he won the first 2 games, but he admitted himself there is still room for improvement. In game 2, there were a couple of shaky moments. He won mostly because of Artemiev's disconnection and mostly because of Artemiev's nerves, and especially game 3, taking his eye off the ball. Just a moment of carelessness. Magnus needs to focus.
Yeah. What was Artemiev's big problem yesterday, Ivanka? What does he need to change today to have any hopes of winning this?
Well, in a nutshell, he had problems with his time management. He was just too slow. And this meant that when it came to those critical moments, he just could not match Magnus Carlsen. Today, he promised us that he would do things differently, that he would play a little bit more dynamic and aggressively in the opening. And let's see what he has in store for us.
Yeah, and if he wins Vladislav Artemiev the second match, then we will head into tiebreaks. And what will happen, David?
So if Artemiev strikes back, then tiebreaks will be decided in blitz chess. That means only 5 minutes on the clock per player, gaining only 3 seconds every move. It's the best of 2 games if it does come down to the blitz, and if the score is 1-1 after those 2 blitz games, it's Armageddon chess. We've seen it before, it will be so dramatic. White will have 5 minutes, Black only having 4 minutes, but White has to win. A draw would count as a win for Black.
And game 1 is coming up shortly. Magnus Carlsen will have the white pieces in the first game. And after this first game, we're going to be joined by tour director Arne Horvei, and he is going to look forward to the tour final starting September 25th. And actually, Ivanka, sorry, if people want to join in and maybe ask Arne some questions, they can do so.
Now is the chance to put the tour director under the spotlight. You know, you can ask him about the wildcards, you can ask him about the bonus system. Basically, you can just grill him a little bit, and I will be asking those questions on your behalf. If you want to send in your questions, then you can do so by tweeting us and using the hashtag #ChessChamps.
Yes, go ahead, you guys. We need to ask some questions to Arne when he joins us after game 1. And of course, the tour standings is a big factor here, because when we have the tour final starting September 25th, it is the winner overall in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour 2021. 40 points is at stake today. 25 points will be given to second place. And do you think the players, David, will have this in the back of their heads? I mean, 40 points, that could be a lot.
Yeah, definitely Magnus Carlsen. He wants to establish as big a lead as possible over Wesley So heading into those tour finals. Artemiev, of course, he would love the 40 points, but he'll just be relieved to have qualified and to be present in those tour finals. This is the first time, I think, ever in chess history that we've seen the world's greatest player in speed chess decided over so many events over the whole course of a year, and there's a lot of prestige attached to that.
And we see Artemiev in 9th place here, but he will go past Maxim Vachier-Lagrave on the 8th place. He will gain at least 25 points today, Vladislav Artemiev. So he will be invited to the tour final. And Magnus Carlsen, well, right now he looks like the king of chess. And that's kind of related to the question of today.
Yes, we have a very fun question for everyone. If you had your own kingdom, who would be the king and queen? And the prize that's up for grabs is one of these Airthings Wave mini device. And as always, you can tweet us using the hashtag #ChessChamps, or you can post your answer on the Champions Chess Tour page on Instagram. Looking forward to seeing all your unusual suggestions. King and queen.
Yeah. Definitely. And who will be the king of the Aimchess US Rapid? It's going to be Magnus Carlsen or Vladislav Artemiev. He was definitely nervous heading into a big final against world champion Magnus Carlsen. And disconnection, that was the last thing the Russian needed yesterday.
Has Artemiev frozen?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Is he disconnected?
Uh-oh.
Okay, so we know that if the players have disconnected, they are given 30 seconds back. Well, they are given their time back if they connect within 30 seconds, reconnect within 30 seconds.
It does not look good on his camera. That looks like a very bad connection. This is a little bit dramatic for the Russian. He was so eager to play the final against world champion Magnus Carlsen. This is not what he wants to be using his time doing.
I was very disappointed in this moment. Because I lost one game, and I start to understand that if I lose again, it will be crazy for me.
You mentioned doing something different. How's your routine going to change, or how's your approach going to change tomorrow on the board?
Maybe I will change my opening style, maybe, or some different things. But still, maybe I must to play more quickly, because I have problems with time also, time management.
Well, fingers crossed that he will be connected throughout the whole day today, Vladislav Artemiev. We do not want this connection to ruin it for him. And he talks about changing it up today. David, what do you expect from him?
Yeah, I expect him to be true to his word. He mentioned changing many things. Firstly, establishing a better internet connection, or at least a backup plan if those problems strike again. But opening strategy, I think that is the main thing for him. He was never able to get his type of position. He was burning a lot of time on the clock due to that. And I think if he starts every game rightly, if he puts Magnus on the back foot, that will give him the confidence to play quicker and to maybe get better results.
And Magnus, of course, starting the day with 2 wins. He was in a great mood yesterday. Several times we could see him laughing and smiling on camera, and it was part of his strategy.
Yeah, but I guess it backfired in the sense that I was too calm and I mouse-slipped. But I guess it helped in the fourth game that I just tried to play quickly and not overthink too much.
What other things did you learn from match 1 here that you will bring to tomorrow, to match 2?
I think this kind of reaffirmed that Artemiev can be quite vulnerable in dynamic and tactical play. So I think that's the main area where I can strike.
Looking at these very cool Aimchess stats that has been provided for us, looking at all the aspects of the games, does it seem like Magnus has a good plan for how to beat Artemiev today as well?
It does seem that way. We see actually some of the stats are quite level, quite even. Artemiev slightly ahead on advantage capitalization and resourcefulness, but it is those numbers towards the bottom of the screen that are the most relevant, or that have been the most relevant so far in the final. Time management, Magnus far, far better. 52% accuracy there, and Artemiev, we've seen it, just too slow. In the endgame, however, Artemiev can strike. That was how he scored his only win yesterday, and that's where he has to rely on his chances.
And, well, he said it, Artemiev, he's definitely going to speed up today. We have updated the head-to-head stats between them in Rapid Chess. Magnus, 4 wins. Artemiev, only 1 win against Magnus in Rapid Chess. He needs some more wins today, Ivanka.
Yeah.
Do you think he can get it?
Well, he has to shake off the past. He has to play with some energy and with some vigor if he's going to do anything differently. And the first thing I would say is just don't have so much respect for Magnus over the board. He just needs to play in a very aggressive style from the beginning. I mean, we saw it in game 2 yesterday. He had Magnus on the back foot. And I think it was only the disconnection that kind of put him off his stride.
The disconnection. Oh, let's hope he stays connected today. Vladislav Artemiev. The first game on the final day of the Aimchess US Rapid is coming up in 2 minutes. Let's head into the play zone. Only 2 players left. We started out with 16 players sitting all over the world. We are left with Magnus Carlsen in Oslo and Vladislav Artemiev in Russia somewhere. He's not in Moscow, is he?
He's not originally from Moscow. He's from Siberia, I think, but... Yeah, who knows where he is these days.
Yeah, it's going to be 6 o'clock in the evening for Artemiev when the first game starts. He is ready. He's always sitting there ready to fight Artemiev. Do you expect some nasty opening preps from him today, David?
Yes, he mentioned he's changing up his style, and yesterday was just too accommodating, especially in a couple of those early games. And as we saw Yelevan Aronian say in an interview yesterday, attacking Magnus. That's the only way. That's the only time people beat him, Magnus Carlsen. We've seen it from Wesley So throughout the tour. Daniel Dubov has had some success against Magnus Carlsen, and every time it's going for Magnus as king. You can't really outmaneuver him in any other area of the game, simply. And that's why Artemiev, he will have been just thinking, how can I mix things up?
Yeah.
And we'll see his approach.
And you can just see him there on the camera. He is getting into the flow. And I'm really dying to see what opening he brings to the table today, especially because he told us he wasn't working with a trainer right now, but he did have a few friends that he could draw upon.
I wonder who those friends are.
I know. And so I'm eager to see what they've collaboratively, it's a difficult word.
I'm not going to try.
Thought up, so yeah.
All right, well, Artemiev, he needs to reach 2.5 points today to take it to tie breaks. If Magnus Carlsen reaches 2 points, then it will be over. He will be the winner of the Aimchess US Rapid. But we always have drama on these final days. It feels that way anyways. And Magnus Carlsen, as always, is the last one to arrive to the board. He will start with the white pieces, the world champion. And yeah, I'm excited as well to especially see what Artemiev brings today, promising us he was going to change things up. Do we know anything about when he's talking about his friends? You know, the Russian team is so strong. Who could that be?
I think those will be some of the younger Russian players. There's dozens of grandmasters around the age of Artemiev. That might be Alexei Sarana, a few other young guys there.
But here we go.
Here we go. Yeah. Meanwhile, the game, it has been a Queen's Gambit. White offering a pawn at an early stage, and Black has so far declined that gambit.
Okay.
I was just trying to think of all these Russian names, and suddenly about 20 popped into my head, and I was thinking, oh, who would it be? There's too many strong young Russian players, but Artemiev, he's such a nice guy. He's very popular within the Russian camp, and for sure he would have been talking to some of them. Meanwhile, he needs to decide on a move now. Remember, he does not want to drop low on the clock too soon. Magnus will smell weakness, he'll sense it, and he'll try and take advantage. OK, meanwhile, Black just developing his knight. So not that aggressive from Black so far. Still pretty solid, cagey stuff. Where will he try and imbalance the position?
I was just going to say, do you think he will go for the kind of Levon-Aronian approach, develop his dark squared bishop out and pin the knight? But he says no. Instead, he develops his knight. So, I mean, there are some tricky ideas, especially if White chooses to develop the dark square bishop to the f4 square.
Yeah, so this Black knight move, a popular one. Favourite of Vladimir Kramnik, former world champion, and it is quite solid. So, OK, we see a trade of pawns, Magnus bringing his queen out. So it is very much going to transpose to a variation of the Queen's Gambit, one of the main variations as well. A very popular opening. White's bishop, White's dark square bishop will come out, Black's dark square bishop will come out. Both sides will castle. Magnus, meanwhile, he's staying flexible. It's more likely that White has the option of which side to castle the king on rather than Black. Black, his king is destined for sure to go over to the right side. And, OK, just a solid pawn push, fortifying the centre. White's bishop does indeed leap out, creating a slightly annoying pin. White's dark square bishop there, just putting some pressure on the Black knight. And I expect Artemiev to develop his dark square bishop as well. You've had similar positions to this one throughout your career, Jovanka?
Many times. And, well, I kind of like these positions for Black. I mean, it's just all about picking your plan and running with it. And when I'm talking about plan, the main issue in this position for the Black pieces is actually how they're going to develop their light square bishop, which, as you can see, is left there at home, and it's stuck there for a while. And here you go. You see, Artemiev has decided to go with his knight to the edge of the board in order to trade off a set of bishops. And now, after bishop takes bishop, White chooses his poison, and he decides to go for an aggressive approach and castle to the left.
Yeah, so castling long, as we call it. Yeah, Magnus showing with this decision that he is in that mood for a fight. He doesn't just want to play solid and defend his lead here. He wants to profit from the white pieces and, OK, bringing his bishop out. Now, Black, there is a huge dilemma. Where does Black put the king? I said that you're nearly guaranteed, you're nearly definitely destined to castle over to that right side, but it's not possible right now. White's queen and bishop are lined up together on a really nice diagonal, eyeing up a pawn. So if Black's king gets hasty and castles over, then White will simply snap off a pawn. Actually, often in these lines, because White's king has already committed itself, and because you know that if you castle to the opposite flank, you'll get attacked, the other plan is to actually copy White and try to castle on this long side, castle on the left, and we might well see Artemiev do that. First, he brought a bishop out, again, trying to create a pin. Jovanka highlighted Black's light squared bishop as a problem piece, stuck behind its own pawn, so it might trade itself off later for a knight. And meanwhile, Magnus just following very conventional wisdom there. This is something I recommend for everyone. If you castle on the long side, take an extra move to shuffle your king towards the corner. It's far, far safer the nearer the corner it gets. And now, decision time for Artemiev. Does he commit the black king, or does he stay flexible? There's lots of moves in this type of position. These types of plans are still very well known, but Artemiev, he has to commit. OK, first, he pushes a pawn. The idea is to blunt the diagonal of the white bishop and of the white queen, remember, lining up. And he's still keeping Magnus guessing. He's still asking the world champion, you know, if you want to attack me on one side, I'm going to castle on the other side. Yes. I'm going to just... It's a bit of a guessing game right now.
Well, that must be a good idea for Artemiev to sort of... Now Magnus kind of has to play on both sides, maybe?
Yeah.
Yes.
Or I mean... has to wait and see where the black king commits itself.
The thing is, with this type of position is that it is very well known, and the plans are very standard. And I'm just looking at the database here, and I can see White's main move is actually to tuck the rook that is sitting on the d1 square and move it to the c1 square. OK, but we have seen the pawn attacking the bishop. And now the bishop.
Trade.
Yep. Now there is a trade, and now there is a big imbalance. I mean, what is Black going to do? Is he going to just continue with the plan of getting his king to safety? That means castling to the long side. Yes, he does that, because there were other options. And now White has a plan, and White's main plan is actually to think about initiating an attack on the left side of the board. And he can do it usually with pieces. So moves that you will see is you will maybe see the white knight that is sitting on c3. It will go to the edge of the board, OK? And the queen actually steps forward. But there's still very much the idea of the rook tucking itself to the c1 square, lining up against the black king, and all these potential knight jumps.
Yep. It's definitely about attacking with pieces right now, and White's queen has declared its intentions going off to that left side of the board. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of White's approach because long-term, you do have these double pawns now on the f-line. So if the queens disappear, if you can never whip up some type of attack, never drum up any activity, then Black's pretty happy with the knights, flexible knights being able to jump over both sides of the board, and White's slightly compromised pawn structure, not ideal either. And, OK, Artemiev, he's been playing much quicker than usual. That's one thing we've noticed. It's already moved 15 and he's still got 13.5 minutes. So great time consumption so far from Artemiev. He needs to keep up this rhythm. Magnus will try and put him under pressure on the clock. Roughly balanced position, but either way, lots of plans for both sides. We've mentioned White will try and attack on this left side of the board. Black will maybe just try and centralise his pieces. Normally, that's another good thing to do if your opponent attacks on one wing, to counter in the centre or to at least fortify your centre. It makes it harder if you control the middle of the board for your opponent to start attacking comfortably on one side. But, OK, Artemiev, as soon as I said he's handled the clock quite well, he's delved into a deep think.
Yeah. That king looks open to me.
Yeah. Both kings potentially open. White's looking safer right now. One thing I would do immediately with Black, actually, to be honest, is just tuck the black king away towards the corner. Maybe the reason Artemiev is hesitant to do that and bring his king over to that left side is because it does step into the eye line of the white queen. I don't think there are any consequences to that immediately, but just human nature. You don't want your king opposite an opponent's queen. And, OK. Maybe he can move the black knight on the edge of the board, on this edge of the board. Maybe he can retreat that back to a more centralised square. Maybe he can bring his rook from the corner into the centre. Yeah. Lots of choice, and he just has to make a decision over the next couple of minutes.
We will keep two eyes on Artemiev's clock today. He spent too much time yesterday. He said that was a big aim for him today, to not spend as much time. Is this one of those critical moments where it's OK, or should he speed up?
It's OK now, as long as he's formulating a kind of 5 or 6 move plan that he can kind of just launch down, just smack down on the board over the next few minutes, over the next few moves. He definitely doesn't want to be spending this amount of time over the next 3 or 4 moves consistently. It's OK if you're planning and seeing far into the future and your moves are automatic after that, but I've been there myself, spending 3-4 minutes sometimes, and suddenly something completely changes on the next turn. Suddenly your opponent plays something you don't expect, and then another 3-4 minutes disappear, and it just spirals from there. So, OK, worrying times, and a bit of a key moment, I think. Now it is the end of the opening, and the first real test for Artemiev in this game.
Yeah, I'm a little bit puzzled, actually, by Artemiev's pause, because, I mean, like you said, there's some kind of strategic concept here that black will be drawing upon. You mentioned it, the king getting to safety. That's number one idea. Another idea that I'm particularly attracted to is actually relocating that knight on the edge of the board. It's not doing a thing. It's done its purpose, which was to trade off the dark square bishops. Now it needs to find a way back into the position. And I think it should just head back.
Yeah.
I mean, the critical moves are in this position for white would be actually maybe trying to strike forward, but that you can't really strike in the center because that comes with too much commitment. Instead, white will be adopting a different kind of idea with attacking with pieces. But as long as black's knight on the edge of the board is well placed, it can be easily met.
Yep, exactly. So in order to become well placed, it has to re-centralize itself. So those are the two most tempting moves here. Bring that black knight back towards the centre or get the black king over to the corner.
Yeah.
And Artemiev, he just has to choose here. Both of those moves are completely fine. He does eventually move his king closer to that kind of safe haven in the corner of the board, but it cost him a lot of time for a very obvious move. And, OK, Magnus has played maybe the most tempting option for white. Artemiev, for sure, he would have calculated this in advance, or he should have looked at it in advance. It's not Harry the H-pawn this time. It's Anna the A-pawn, just pushing on the other side, trying to destabilise black's best defender, that black knight in front of the king. Yep, I think the black knight will just retreat at some point over the next couple of turns. This white pawn isn't doing too much damage on its own, but it is still a bit of an annoying move to face.
What is a good tip to beginners when there is queenside castling and kings look open like they do now-ish? What is a good rule when you play a game like that?
In general, just place as many pieces in the vicinity, as many possible defenders around your king as possible. And that's why the black knight on that same B line is doing a great job. That's why Magnus is trying to kick it away. And if you look at what Magnus has done, not only has he put the white queen on this side of the board as an attacker, also the white knight and bishop, but they are potential defenders of the white king. If everything goes wrong, if white doesn't whip up an attack, at least they will act as defenders and they'll keep white's king nice and safe. So actually, both kings are maybe equally vulnerable, but white has more pieces on this side of the board.
OK.
So no matter where you castle, actually, especially if kings are on the same side as each other, just put as many pieces on that flank as possible. That will give you chances. And even if everything goes wrong, it will ensure that there are no direct attacks against you.
OK.
Yeah, I'm slightly concerned for Artemiev. He's looking at him, he seems a little bit nervy and... OK, he steps forward with his queen. And how is he planning to meet Magnus's threat, which is just to push his A-pawn forward and attack the knight?
You know what, Ivanka? I think he's trying to get ambitious. Artemiev, I think he's trying to mix things up because this last move, there's simply no point behind it other than to utilise the black knight into white's half of the board. So Magnus, if he's consistent with his plan, will push this pawn forward, kick away the defender, the black's best defender. If this knight retreats now, if it steps back, Magnus has the opportunity to kind of start leaping forward and he'll bring his knight in towards the centre, maybe going for some kind of checkmating attack against the black king. So I don't think Artemiev can risk that. The whole reason he put his queen on this square is that so he can support the knight jumping forward. And now the queen indirectly controls this square as well. And now this is quite controversial because white can even just take this knight, but after the pawn recaptures, yes, black has a set of double pawns, but black has some space, and you've opened up the black rook potentially. The black queen, remember, defends this pawn, and also now that the bishop's gone, there might be some checks against the white king. Yeah, I don't think Magnus is going to be attracted to this. I think black has his fair share of chances in terms of dynamism. It's not long-term here for black. Long-term, black's actually suffering because white has two central pawns, but short-term, black definitely has some threats. And that's why maybe Magnus in the current position is hesitating. He wants to push this pawn, but maybe now isn't the moment. Maybe now he should first start thinking about his rooks. Maybe he can bring this guy to the side in order to create some more room for this guy to join the action later on. Also, this feels like a semi-open file. It feels like there might be targets here later. And, OK, if black jumps in now, at least you can, for example, lift up this rook and stack the other rook behind it and just, again, more defensive pieces around white's king, but also those pieces might potentially attack against black's king later.
It looks very, to my eye, it looks very strong, this for the white pieces for Magnus Carlsen. if he also has that rook on that side, just all those very powerful pieces stacked together.
Yeah, it does visually look impressive, and that's why the computer loves it so much. But Black's position is still rock solid. After all, Artemiev hasn't done anything wrong. And, OK, so we have seen some moves on the board.
Let's just show this as well, because White's pawn did push forward, Black's knight as well, jumping into White's half. We predicted this might be one option, and then Magnus actually threatened checkmate in one move, using the queen and pawn together to try to get to the Black king. So checkmate threat on the board. Artemiev said, OK, I've got to block it up. He pushed his pawn forward, bypassing White's pawn, but this guy is going to be a thorn in Black's side forever now. There's always going to be threats, checkmating ideas against the Black king as long as this pawn survives. And Magnus, he says, OK, time to bring the knight forward. He's actually playing around the Black knight. I mentioned taking it off, just too dangerous. I think that would only help Black. White needs to just ignore this knight and play around it. And with this last knight move, Magnus is hinting maybe at some sacrifices later on this square to open up the Black king. But first of all, if Black just moves the rook, for example, then the White knight might try to jump in, attacking the Black queen, and it cannot be captured because there is also a pin along this line. So Magnus, he is the one trying to attack, and he's just saying to Artemiev, you've got one strong piece in this position. Sorry, not this square. One strong piece, the knight, but that's it. That's the only good thing about Black's position.
Well, that seems like a great tactic by Magnus Carlsen because Artemiev is spending so much time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Again, remember, when you're low on time, you want to be attacking, not defending. It takes so much more time to work out defensive maneuvers rather than attacking maneuvers. When we practice puzzles, for example, on websites, in books, we always look at the attacking maneuvers. That's why our brains are so in tune with that. But defensive ideas, it takes a lot longer to work out.
How do you practice defense then?
It's purely practice at the board.
Yeah, playing games.
And analysing games.
Yeah, you can also study some positions and put yourself in the role of the defender. It is really just about practice, like David says. Practice makes perfect. And
for example, you could look at some of the best defensive players over history. You could look at some former world champions like Tigran Petrosian, who is known as one of the best defenders. You study the games, and he was one type of player, for example, who he would see the threats coming before the opponent even realised, kind of dreamt up those ideas. So he would prevent them in advance, and when the opponent kind of got closer to the position, they'd realise, oh, he's already stopped my idea. So there are certain types of players. The modern players who do that, I would say maybe Sergei Karyakin, Magnus sometimes, Wesley So, lots of defensive
definitely
giants.
And in order to defend, you also you have to remember that it's not just about sitting tight, it's also about finding resourceful tricks. And for this, Wesley So is fantastic. Levon Aronian is another one who is able to still weasel his way out of tricky situations. And talking about tricky situations, Artemiev has made maybe a mysterious rook move and tucking his rook on the c-line. And I suspect that the idea is that if the White knight jumps in to attack the queen, that the queen won't move and that there might be a counterattack instead.
Wow, OK, interesting. So maybe we can show this on the board, Jovanka. So Black has just made this move. You called it mysterious, just planting the rook behind its own pawn, staring at this pawn. Maybe one idea as well is to bring the Black rook closer to the defence later, this one in the corner. But as you mentioned, the White knight jumping forward. If this happens, attacking the Black queen, Black doesn't necessarily want to drop back and lose a bit of time with the Black queen back where it came from. You mentioned a counterattack.
Yes.
You're going to do that against the White queen. OK, and you want to do that with the Black knight?
Yes.
I guess dropping back, hitting the queen. And now the reason that the Black rook is safer on this square is because after a trade of queens, knight takes queen, suddenly the Black rook would not be attacked on the square it previously stood on. So that is deep. That is 3 or 4 moves, that plan. But the best players in the world, that's what they do. They see these ideas ahead of time, and therefore they put their pieces on safe squares. They just allow the ideas to happen, but they make sure that it's in favourable circumstances. And yeah, that's a nice idea, Jovanka. Also, we should mention, if the White knight jumps forward, if Black counterattacks against the White queen, that if the White queen moves now, if it doesn't go on, if it doesn't stay creating this pin, then maybe the White knight might drop off. And if you step forward, then the Black queen now will be happy to plant itself on this diagonal. And really tense here right now. There is a pin. I mean, there's so many pins. Black's queen is pinning on this diagonal. White's queen is pinning on this file. I think Magnus will try and avoid this. There's just too much to work out. And that is why the world champion is thinking. In the current position, if we go back, this knight jump, might well backfire for white. It's the most tempting move in the position, but it might backfire. And that's why Magnus, wow, this one wasn't even on my radar, but he's put his king in the corner. And the reason he's done this actually is not necessarily because the king's actually safer on this square. There is an open line in front of it, but it's more concrete. White wanted to also bring his rook to the side, but he couldn't do this because of a nasty knight check. The black knight would jump in now with a fork, a double attack. That's why white's king has seen this in advance and preempted that knight check by just shuffling to the corner. So white's king in the corner now. He is ready, Magnus, to bring his rook across.
We have some crafty kind of maneuvering going on here, David. It's like two mentalists have sat down on the board and just thinking about what does the opponent want to do and preempting those moves. And just to...
Definitely some grandmasterly planning here.
Yes.
Spotting things a mile away.
Yeah, and just to remind you all that our tour director, Arne Horve, will be appearing during the first break, and it's your chance to put him under the spotlight. You can ask him about the wildcard system. You can ask him about the tour bonus. You can ask him basically whatever you want. To do so, you've got to tweet us using the hashtag #ChessChamps, and I will be putting your questions to our tour director.
Yeah, maybe his best memories from the season so far with only the tour final left.
Yes.
You can ask us what he really thinks of us, what he really thinks of the players.
How hard it is to deal with us every day.
Yeah, we're divas here. OK, we have some extra moves on the board.
OK, so black's king tucking itself away in the corner, just like white's has done. So makes a lot of sense. Also out of the eye line of the white queen. Meanwhile, Magnus continuing the plan he initiated on the last turn, bringing his rook across. Now there is definitely a threat against that black knight. White is threatening that knight 3 times with the white bishop, with the white queen, and with that white rook. And Artemiev, he doesn't necessarily want to risk that knight being captured. Maybe he'll just retreat it. That black knight on that c4 square, black's best piece right now, needs to step back. And Artemiev, he has a couple of squares with which to retreat that knight, but again, the clock times do indicate that he hasn't come up with a long-term plan. Yes, he might retreat that knight, but he seems unsure of what to do next. Every turn, Magnus is building up, improving the white knight, improving the white rook. Artemiev struggling to counter that.
Yeah, I was going to call you Danger there. but David...
Danger Howell. That's my DJ name.
Because I was thinking there's actually some concrete danger in the position. I mean, if black is a little bit careless on where he puts the knight, I mean, maybe white can be thinking about making a sacrifice with his own... Oh, OK, I was thinking about sacrificing the knight for Magnus, and Artemiev just says, hey, there's a pawn up for grabs. Why don't you take it?
Yep.
So now Artemiev stepped up with his rook. I didn't anticipate that move.
OK, so he brought his rook up 1 square, a really defensive move. We'll explain this in a second. But Jovanka, you just to show your point, if the black knight went to the wrong square, white could actually break through potentially by sacrificing his knight. And we might well just see a trade here. And now this knight is under attack. If it moves, it cannot move actually. This would just allow checkmate. Black's king would be caught in the corner. And that's why Artemiev didn't want to retreat his knight. He thought it was just too risky. And by bringing his rook forward 1 square, he's gambited a pawn. He said to Magnus, you take my knight, please take my knight. There is a hidden trap, however, behind this. Now, no matter how white recaptures, for example, if you capture with the rook, there will be a double attack. This black pawn will step forward, attacking the white knight and attacking the white rook. And there's no way to save both pieces. This wouldn't be changed if the queen captured this pawn. We would have just seen a queen trade and this same double attack. So maybe Magnus won't be tempted to capture this knight yet. And this is a really sneaky, devious trap by Artemiev.
And I love the fact that it's deep.
Yeah.
You know, it just looks so innocuous. But I tell you, these Russian grandmasters, they love defending against potential threats to their king by using the horizontal power of the rooks.
Yeah, the black rook will defend on the 7th rank and its fellow will defend across the 8th rank. So, yeah, very sneaky. And right now, Magnus has to decide to take, not to take. If not, then maybe he'll just shift up his rook. And this same idea that black is utilising. The white rook will swing behind and just using all the possible lines, maximising all the rooks if possible. And, yeah, Magnus, I still prefer white's position slightly, but black is the one as well, creating some tricks, some traps here and there. And Artemiev, if it wasn't for the time situation, I would have said he's handled this position pretty well in the circumstances. OK, white's knight dropping back. That is surprising. The knight came from here just, what was it, 3 moves ago? okay, what is Magnus's idea? Maybe he wants to start initiating play in the center of the board. Maybe he thinks that the knight has done its job. Okay, we will find out, because black's rook has found its most natural square, the two rooks teaming up together, just in case the position ever opens up. For example, if the black pawn ever pushes later on in the game, you don't want to rush, but just in case, then the black rooks will be well positioned.
So obviously, Magnus must have anticipated this move.
Yeah.
So this a little bit strange knight move by him. We must see maybe the plan behind that now, then?
Yeah, I mean, we must find out the plan, because I don't understand it initially. The white knight literally on move 19, it stood here. Then on move 22, so on move 19, it moved to the side. On move 22, it moved back where it came from, back to this square. And I'm struggling to understand, Jovanka.
Could it be all about destabilizing the knight in on the c4 square?
It's all about this guy.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking, you know, the move that white wants to play is maybe to push a pawn forward in the center, explode open the position, but he's not ready for that just yet. So... Because
also this would, remember, invite the offside knight, the black knight, which has been doing nothing for the last 10 moves. It would invite this piece to the game.
So I'm thinking that the idea is quite sophisticated, and maybe the white knight has plans of actually even stepping one row backwards and controlling some squares, and again putting pressure on the knight.
So maybe this way.
Yeah.
And now there is definitely a threat. All three of white's pieces are ganging up against the same black knight, and black now has to make a decision to retreat the knight or to just defend it with a pawn. Either way, there will be pluses, there will be minuses, and black will have to make a big commitment. So this must be Magnus's idea, to move the knight again out of the way. Sorry, after black's moved his rook, to move this knight out of the way. But the longer he thinks, the more time Artemiev will have to figure out what to do about the black knight. It's definitely a game of knights right now. White's bishop is a bit of a bystander, and okay, Magnus, this is strange, this is mysterious. Maybe he thinks there's no way to improve the position. He takes a timeout and pushes this pawn. It looks irrelevant, this move, but I guess the idea is that he's freed up his rook. If he moved his rook away previously, then maybe the black queen could get greedy at some point and take this foot soldier. Definitely feels like both sides not quite clear what their plans should be. They're not 100% sure, so they're just biding their time and waiting. And in the current position, that has given black the opportunity to re-centralize his knight.
Yes. And still, it's incredibly cagey and incredibly tense. I mean, I also saw another possibility for the white knight. It could even head to the e4 square.
Okay. That would be very flashy, Jovanka.
It would be very flashy. I'm not sure it does great things there, but it certainly looked good. Still, it's very much a wait-and-see game. Now it's up to Magnus to come up with a plan of improvement. OK, and he steps forward with his rook.
Is this simply to bring the other rook then behind it?
Potentially. It is certainly a potential idea in the air, and both players are kind of trying to keep the other one guessing.
And us.
Yeah, and us. It definitely feels like, again, this is the calm before the storm. This game is going to explode at some point. Both kings are so vulnerable, potentially long-term, that a draw is by far the least likely result, despite what the evaluation bar says, 0.0. That just reflects that white's chances and black's chances are balanced. Far from a draw here. There's still so much tension. It's not that many open lines, but the open lines that do exist, they will be contested by rooks.
So which king is the most vulnerable, like Magnus's with nothing in front of it, or the black king with that white pawn, you know, threatening that square?
Yeah, that white pawn just keeping it caged, in a way, that black king. I would far rather have white's king right now, also because white has more pieces around it. The white queen will do a great defensive job. White's knight will do a great defensive job. I'm just scared that the black king in the corner, if black's rooks ever disappear, and if white's rook can ever get to the top and check it, it will actually just be trapped. And that's what we call a mating net. When the king is caged, you might not be able to get to it immediately, but long-term, there will always be these kind of tricks, these sacrifices to get to that black king. Meanwhile, white's king, yes, it's open, but the black queen, it still takes an age to come over and attack it. And if black can't kind of combine attacking forces against white's king, then the white king is pretty happy to hang out on a vulnerable square, on a kind of exposed square.
So the big plan for Magnus then, is that basically to get those black rooks off the board?
Long term, he would love that, actually, I think. That would definitely reduce the defensive potential around black's king.
Yeah. And meanwhile, the kings and queens remain on the board. And that is our quiz of the day.
Yes.
So you can always tweet us using the hashtag #ChessChamps. If you had your kingdom, who would be the king and queen? And the knight steps backward.
OK, so Artemiev deciding finally to give ground. It was all about that knight we mentioned. Black was trying to maintain it there as long as possible, just really annoying white, just in white's half of the board. But Magnus was ignoring it, and maybe the tension just got too much for Artemiev, deciding to retreat. And now, 2 moves here that I would be tempted to play with white. Firstly, that white rook in the corner, the right corner, just doing nothing. So just swing it across, swing it to team up with its other rook. And actually, all of the rooks would then be on the C line, all 4 rooks. That would be maximum tension. But if Magnus is playing in a more... OK, he does this. This is just it's autopilot, essentially.
Yeah.
Why bother calculating any lines when you can improve a piece? I was going to say as well, he could have pushed a pawn maybe in the centre there with white. That would have initiated more direct action. But in general terms, you don't necessarily want to initiate direct contact and conflict against your opponent's pieces while you have one bad piece.
Ooh, talking about conflict, David.
Now
you mentioned it. You mentioned it right at the correct time. Now, Artemiev has made his move. He's a little bit low on the clock. And, OK, the big question is, how is Magnus going to react to this pawn break? Take the pawn, attack the knight. Sorry, not the knight, the rook.
Yeah, we should mention there's a huge threat in the position. If black's given time, black's pawn that has just pushed, it'll push 1 square further down and attack white's queen and attack the white bishop at the same time. So Magnus, he either has to capture that pawn or he has to move a piece. He doesn't have time now to just ignore it, to continue manoeuvring. He has to move the white queen, white knight or white bishop if he doesn't want to take that black pawn. OK, he does move the white knight. So as Jovanka mentioned, attacking black's rook, that has forced a trade of knights, and white's bishop captures. So now black's pawn cannot really, well, it can step forward to attack the white queen, but it won't be a double attack. White's queen will just move out the way. And I think Magnus would be happy. And I'm slightly surprised, I must admit, to see the evaluation bar go up in black's favour, because it feels like the black king is a bit loose now on the light squares. White's bishop may be sneaking in towards it later on.
One thing I've been noticing about the evaluation bar in this particular variation, it doesn't understand the position. I mean, at times it said, hey, white's position is virtually winning. It's absolutely not. Black's position is still rock solid. And as Artemiev has shown, you know, there's still a lot of things to play for. And I agree with you. I just don't think black is much better here. I just think it's a position.
Chances for both sides.
Exactly. And that's what we want.
Yeah, I guess black's hopes rely upon the fact that he has queen and knight. And queen and knight against queen and bishop tends to be a pretty decent combo. Knight's doing the only thing that a queen can't. Bishops and queens, sometimes, if they have no targets on the same colour complex, then they do struggle. Meanwhile, black there just putting his pieces on dark squares. Black's queen keeping everything nice and protected. It's very sensible. Now I expect white's queen to, pin this black pawn.
Step to the side. And white has a lot of compensation for this ruined pawn structure there on the right in terms of control of the light squares. Just take a look at that pawn sitting there on the A6 square. Yeah. It's just such a dangerous pawn. So many checkmating ideas on the board because of it.
Yeah, and that's why black's king has actually decided it's not feeling entirely safe in the corner anymore on a light square, where white's bishop could potentially check it. So the black king sliding back in the direction it came from to a dark square. So fewer opportunities now for Magnus to check that king. And also, in a potential endgame, if the queens do disappear, if the rooks disappear, black's king heading towards the centre. And look at this. Actually, earlier, white's king went to the corner, then the black king copied. Now, black's king has gone back. Now, white's king has gone back as well. Both players definitely playing copycat, just mimicking each other there.
Do you think this is an indirect draw offer?
No.
No.
The kings are just much better here than they previously were.
OK. I thought maybe that Magnus was saying, hey, I'll move my king. If you move your king backwards, I'll copy.
No. I think Artemiev, firstly, he doesn't necessarily want to make a draw because he knows he's behind in the match overall. But secondly, the black king definitely doesn't want to be in the corner on a light square, stuck and trapped. So he definitely wouldn't initiate a repetition, even if he were happy to split the point. He does retreat with his queen, however. So a bit of a waiting move with that one, but the black queen is now protected. She wasn't protected on the square she previously stood. She's defended by the black rook now, so there's no pin anymore along the diagonal that both the queens sit on. So black is free to maybe trade if he wants to in the centre of the board later on.
And is there kind of like positional dangers? Like, for instance, what kind of endgames would you have in the back of your pocket? For instance, you mentioned the queen and knight working better than the queen and bishop. I mean, what about if everything got traded and just the knight and the bishop was on the board?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. It would depend on how the pawn structure resolves itself. Black's knight actually stepping back soon. Artemiev, for sure, his threat right now, or his plan at least, is to trade pawns in the centre of the board. And look at that black knight. It defends its queen. So if black is given the time to trade a set of pawns, the queens would be looking at each other on this diagonal. The rooks would all be looking at each other on the C line. And everything's just going to come off. And we might get an answer to Ivanka's question, knight against bishop. Normally, that favours the bishop with pawns on both sides of the board, but the pawn structure is very unorthodox. And, OK, we do see a trade from Magnus's side. So he's the one to initiate things. And Artemiev, he's saying, please get off all the rooks. Please, let's get off the queens. OK.
He has to, because his king is in so much danger. OK, so now a trade of rooks, and we're going to see I was going to say trade of queens, but I spoke too soon.
Why did he take there with the queen and not the pawn, Artemiev?
I think he was just desperate to get the queens off.
OK.
Maybe as well, if he'd taken with the black pawn, the king would have been vulnerable from the front vertically. So he took with the black queen. He was hoping that Magnus would go for Ivanka's first instinct, maybe there to trade queens. But Magnus says no. The black king, is easier to get to than the white king.
So does that show Magnus has ambitions to win this game?
Yes. And there's actually a concrete idea on the position. I mean, take a look at black's king. It's standing on an open diagonal. So there are potential ideas of the white queen swinging forward and giving check to this king.
Yeah, swinging across to the F4 square. So white's queen wants to conquer the dark squares because the bishop would take care of the light squares. So you need to use the queen and bishop on opposite colour complexes later on.
But, I mean, there is some strategical risk, actually, that Magnus is taking, because if it doesn't work well for him, he has given Artemiev the queen and knight combo, which is a little bit magical at times. OK, queen steps back. Did you notice? He puts it on the same diagonal as his king. Artemiev is playing in a defensive mode, but this is what he needed to do.
Yep, he definitely needed to guard all the dark square diagonals. And I think the reason Magnus was happy to initiate those trades of rooks is because black's knight temporarily is badly placed. If black gets 2 or 3 moves to put that knight on a better square, I prefer black's position. But right now, Magnus has that time. He has that small window of opportunity to create threats himself. And the white queen actually swung across to the centre. Queens are great in central squares, but it had ideas on dark square diagonal to go to the top corner of the board, actually. So black has blocked off any entry squares into his half with that pawn push. So he's just trying to close the door in the face of the white queen right now. Can Magnus find an avenue of attack? Can he relocate that queen and find a different angle to creep into black's position? Or is black's knight going to get back into the game? I'm starting to think black should be OK here. He just needs one move to re-centralise that black knight, and very solid.
Yeah, it is very solid, but there is one big weakness in the position that I've noticed. OK, black's king is weak. That's a dynamic problem. But when it comes to the structure, I'm just looking at that pawn in the middle of the board. It's isolated. It's on a light square. And I'm just thinking that bishop and queen could work together and create some nasty threats against that weak pawn. And also, I'm just also looking at the queens. They stand opposite each other. The black queen is undefended. Maybe there are some potential ideas of undermining this pawn by pushing the central pawn forward.
Yeah, so white's central pawn could set forward, and black's central pawn is the weakness, potentially. And, isolated pawn now for black. Usually isolated pawns, the idea is to blockade them and then start attacking them.
But David, come and look at this. Magnus is trying to take a wrecking ball to Artemiev's pawn side. This should be a new word. Pawn structure is what I wanted to say.
Yeah. And, so he was actually giving up a pawn temporarily, Magnus. He was just trying to open up some lines for the white queen to use. I mentioned that the white queen needs to use a different angle, just a different avenue of attack. And now there has been one line opened up, the H line in the corner. So white's queen could could just swing across and try to come up to the top of the board and get to the black king from behind. So there we go. The white queen does use this new line, a new opening for her to infiltrate potentially.
Okay, so this plan that you talked about many moves ago about getting into that that 8th row.
Yeah.
Because that king cannot move one step forwards.
Yeah, it's all to do with that pawn. And this type of pawn push, pushing a corner pawn forward and just clamping down and controlling the escape squares for an opponent's king, that was popularized by AlphaZero, the AI program. And Magnus, he was one of the first to kind of follow that trend and really compute those ideas, integrate them into his own play.
And meanwhile, the black king steps forward and Magnus needs no asking twice. He goes forward with his queen. So there is a big threat in the position, actually, for the queen to potentially swing across all the way to the left side and start attacking that pawn on a7.
This last move, Jovanka, I'm slightly surprised because black has dropped a pawn.
It has.
The black queen is attacking white's bishop, but you can ignore it and counterattack. And right now, the most obvious move to me, I'm trying to work out whether black has some annoying checks, but I was going to say white's queen could have taken a black pawn on the f6 square and attacked the black knight.
But David, look, there's it looks like a killer move on the board. I mean, it might not be killer, but it certainly looks incredibly dangerous because it defends the bishop. And at the same time, there is a huge threat in the position of the queen stepping one square backwards and deliver a potential checkmate. Yeah, to checkmate is in the air.
So it's actually a checkmate in 2 threats. So white's queen is threatening to step back next to the black king, teaming up with her bishop, check, force the black king back into the corner, and then she'll step in front of the black king, deliver the kiss of death.
Wow. And so that one has a name. That checkmate has a name.
Okay.
I'll tell you, it's Lolly's mate.
Lolly's mate. It's a nice lolly, you just get it out.
And well, with that in the air, and 12 seconds for Artemiev.
Yeah, oh, he steps forward.
I think he had to try something like this, Jovanka, just in practical terms, because he had only 20 seconds. It might be, I mean, it looks like a suicide mission, this black king stepping out into the open, and it does look like white is winning with the most obvious move in the position, actually, to step back with the white queen to that d7 square that we mentioned next to the black king. But you still have to hunt down that black king. It's not going to be 100% easy to trap.
OK, and the check is on the board, and now the king, no other option, has to step forward. So Artemiev, make that move instantly, and there's only...
There's 2 squares with which he can run to.
Yes.
So he can run towards the white bishop, he can dodge to the left, or he can go right into the middle of the board. Which one were you thinking, Jovanka? Personally, I was tempted to go into the centre of the board, but Stockfish says no, that one loses for black.
I was tempted to go, oh, he's gone into the centre. No, the wrong way. I thought he had to go attack the bishop. OK, so
here... saying this is close to lost.
Yeah.
This looks like it's...
not just in one way either. White has several opportunities here. OK, he does find the safest opportunity. White's queen could have gone and grabbed a pawn. That was not human, though, too greedy. So he stepped back. The white bishop guards the white king.
And not only is that white bishop guarding the king, it's also trapping the black king. Now there is a deadly threat of white pushing one pawn forward and delivering a David and Goliath checkmate.
You know, all those checkmate names, Jovanka. And, OK, after this last black pawn move, he has created an escape route for the black king. Black's king can run back to safety now, but white just grabbed a pawn. Magnus now, he has a very strong passed pawn, only 2 squares away from becoming a new queen. And Artemiev knows that time is running out, both on the clock and on the board. He has to go for checks. He's trying to get to the white king, but white's king will find safety on a light square. It will run up the board, just like black's has done, and there won't be any more checks. So Artemiev retreating his queen, but all white needs to do now is move the queen out of the way, give a check. There we go.
Yeah.
And now white's pawn, that beautiful A pawn, Anna, she's going to become a queen.
She's a runner. She's getting to the destination. And there's just... I mean, I must say, Magnus just played superbly.
Yep.
And what a story this game is. Just that A pawn.
Yeah. It started its journey, what was it, 30 moves ago? And
it's like a fairy tale, isn't it?
Yeah.
Once
Anna becoming a queen, maybe.
Anna. And so she was all alone in her...
But she fought for her country.
Yes.
She threatened the king.
Yeah.
And now she can go all the way to become a queen.
Yes.
Will we even see it?
I think Artemiev, he might allow it or he might resign just before that happens. But, yeah, either way, that one pawn has won the game for white. It forced all these checkmating ideas, forced the black king to run away scared. And then the black king, once it did run away, there was no way, no more blockaders for it. And yeah, it's just a matter of time. But Magnus doing the right thing, sitting on his hands, just trying to work out the final details. He knows that he's just a move or two away now from clinching it. He can push that pawn. Maybe he can move the white queen first. For example, you can just trade queens off the board right now if you want to play completely safe chess. But no, he goes for a new queen first.
He pushes the queen. The only move that Artemiev can play is to deliver a check. And now the king is as safe as houses on that d2 square. And unfortunately, Anna is just simply going to go to the 8th row and become a queen. OK, we have a tricky move from Artemiev. He puts his knight to c6 and hopefully, you know, has his finger crossed that maybe the Anna will drop.
Yeah, so white's pawn now, its promotion squares covered. Black's queen is protecting it from behind, but Magnus just grabbing another pawn. He actually created a pin along the 6th rank towards the black king. He's forced the black king even further away right now. And with this last move, Carlsen attacking the black queen. He's forced the black queen to take that white pawn. Anna has dropped off, but she has given up her life for a knight. And white is a whole knight up, and that has caused Artemiev to resign.
Wow, the hero of the game, Anna, wins Magnus Carlsen the first game of today. Artemiev shaking his head. This is dramatic for the Russian. If Magnus now wins the next game, it's going to be over. He's going to be the winner of the Aimchess US Rapid. Artemiev needs at least a draw, preferably a win in the next game. But what a game this was by world champion Magnus Carlsen.
And that's why pushing your pawns forward, especially these flank pawns, especially these rook pawns, can win you the game long-term, not just short-term. First of all, they're great in an endgame. As we saw, this pawn was almost becoming a new queen, but they do also create checkmating ideas against the opponent's king. And in this position, we saw Magnus has just teamed up his queen and bishop. There's a deadly threat. For example, if black ignores it, then the white queen would step back. And now we see why the pawn is such a fearsome attacker. The white queen would slide across. And as Jovanka mentioned, this is Lolly's mate, the black king trapped due to the queen and pawn. So in this position, actually, Artemiev made the final blunder. He should and needed to step back, the black queen to act as a defender, covering this key square. And it still looks pretty bad for black. But if the white queen comes across, trying again to team up with her pawn, then black's knight could at least defend, and the game would go on. Still good for white, but black in full defensive mode. Instead, the black king went on a journey, and as we saw a few moves later, white gave a check, white dropped his bishop back to a safe square, and in this position, Anna's rival fell. This pawn now unrivaled and did cost black the knight. A real long-term strategic masterpiece from Magnus Carlsen.
Game 2 coming up in about 14 minutes. Artemiev will have the white pieces, and he cannot lose this game. If Magnus wins, it's going to be over. He will be the winner of the final regular event in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour 2021.
Oh no, surely not.
We've seen a mouse slip, Kaya.
No!
Should be enough for Radjabov. We saw Nepomniachtchi throw something there.
He is so angry at himself.
He's checkmate on the board.
Timo Radjabov has started celebrating. Oh, look how happy he is. We did see some tears. Wesley, so...
I mean, it could look very funny.
3 seconds. 3 seconds.
That's impressive remove.
Look at that. Wow. Whoa. Wow, look at that. Magnus Carlsen in Armageddon.
Yay! Yeah.
Applause again from Wesley. So almost 50 different players have participated so far in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour 2021. 81 days so far. $1.3 million have so far again been given out. And now we're joined by the tour director, Arne. Nice to have you in the studio.
Nice to be here.
Yeah. And how happy are you, Arne, about the first season of the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour?
It's been an amazing journey. It's been simply fantastic. What we have accomplished, what the players have accomplished, what you guys have done, and David, it's been, and all the other streamers as well, it's been really, truly amazing.
Yeah, I agree. And it's not over. The final will start in about a month, September 25th, the big final of the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour. And can you now finally reveal where will it be?
Well, we hoped that we were going to bring everybody to San Francisco, but as everybody now doing physical events now during these times it's really it's not easy to do physical events. So, but that proves the good things of our concept, that since we are doing things online, we can then adapt and we can do a hybrid event. Yeah. So the finals this year will be a hybrid event with, we will gather a few players in Oslo and the rest of the players will play from their home countries.
Wow, okay. So, Ivanka, for you as well, as a chess player, how special has it been that you can have these top events with the top prizes and the top players, and they're actually sitting at home?
It's been pretty insane, actually, because we've been able to see them get up close and personal just from their cameras. We've been able to see all the emotions, and we've been also able to enjoy such fantastic chess. Yeah. So it has been incredibly special from both a chess player and a commentator's point of view.
And so much fun then that we will have a few players gathered in Oslo for the big final. And Arne, everyone's wondering, who will play? It's the tour final. It's a completely different kind of event. So who will play, basically?
We will invite the top 8 players. Will be automatically invited to the finals. So because it's 10 players playing in the finals. Top 8 is invited, and then the rest is based on wild cards.
Okay, and you can't reveal yet who the wild cards will be?
Nope.
Ooh, keeping us waiting. Well, there is a big deal also in the tour final about bonus points. It's been a little bit difficult to explain. So you take it away, Arne. How will the players start with these bonus points?
Well, the winner of the finals is also going to be the winner of a full season, the world's best chess players of a full season of online chess. So bringing what you have accomplished throughout the tour should matter when it comes to the final.
Yeah.
So it means that it will be bonus points going into the final based on the tour standings.
Okay, and actually I can try to give an example. If we take up the overall tour standings in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour, so this is obviously before the final points in this final has been given out. It's 40 points for the winner and 25 points to the second place. So Artemiev will definitely be among top 8. But for Magnus Carlsen, if he gains those 40 points, he will be on 339 points. I calculated this. Wesley So, he's on 261 points, so that's 78. Potentially, Magnus can go in with 78 more points than Wesley So. So half a point for 10 points. That actually means Magnus can start the final with 4 more points than Wesley So and Arne. That sounds like a lot, but in the tour final, there will be many points given out.
That's true. So since they're given half a point advantage for every 10 points they have from the lowest rated player, then maybe Magnus can have an advantage of 4 points. But in the tour finals is a round robin event with 9 rounds and 3 points for a victory. So there's a lot of points that will be given out during the finals. So it's not by far not decided. You have an advantage based on how you have done throughout the tour, but it's not decided who's going to win from the start of the finals.
So basically, every day in the tour final will be like today. There's going to be matches with 4 games and tie breaks if the matches aren't decided, and many points will be given out in all of the matches. And Ivanka, we did say that the viewers could ask some questions. Do we have some questions?
We do. Are you ready?
Now?
Yeah. Are you ready, Anna, for your moment in the spotlight? So Richard Logan is looking ahead in the future, and he asks, this Meltwater events have been amazing. What's the plan after the tour final?
Ooh.
Well, good question. This is just the first season. So season number 2 will go ahead next year, and we look forward to give all the details for we have already revealed the dates, but we will look into the format. We will look into how to take this from this level and even take it further for the next season as well.
Okay, and talking about the format, Svaladali says, does the tour director think that there is a case for changing the scoring system in the preliminaries to discourage quick draws? That's been a controversial subject.
Yes, there will always be draws, but I think that we will take a good look into what we have learned from this season and also the feedback from the players, and then include that with also the feedback we get from the chess world as well, and look into what we can do and what we should do for the next season as well.
And quite like Kent Lufgren's comments. It says, how do you recruit good commentators for the live stream tournament like yours?
Well, you search and you search and you search and you do tests and tests and then you end up with the best ones.
Okay, and Himi finally asks, who is your favourite player?
My favorite player?
Yes.
I think that we have a lot of really, really good and interesting personalities on the tour. So I don't have one single favorite player. I'm really excited about all the different, how we get to know the different players in a much more personal way throughout this season than we normally do in a regular chess tournament. So myself, I've gotten to know much more about a lot of the players than I did before the tour started. So I must say that I've learned to like many more of the players than I did before the tour started.
Oh, are you going to reveal to us who surprised you the most?
I think that I'll say that it's good to learn more about the players.
Well, it's been a long season, but as mentioned, it's not over. But do you have a favorite moment, something you particularly remember from the 9 tournaments we had so far?
Well, I'm a sucker for emotions.
Yeah.
So I must say that Rajabo's win, when he the tears started running in his face, and also Magnus's first victory, when he saw the pure joy, the pure excitement of finally winning and getting that in the bag. And that is also the beauty of this concept, that the players are much more open to show emotions when they play online. So we get to see much more of their roller coasters emotionally as well than you would do over the board. And of course, over the board, you need to keep your face. But it's been really exciting to see the response from the players during this tournament.
And, well, some more response is about to come because Artemiev and Magnus Carlsen, they are eager to start the next game, actually, 5 minutes before it was supposed to be started. Okay, so here we go with game 2. Arne, thank you so much for being in the studio. We look forward to the big final.
Do myself.
Yeah, September 25th. Okay, so we'll make a shift in the studio, get David back if you don't want to comment this to
Arne. David did that part, and I'll be in the back office.
All right, Ivanka, you take it away then.
Yeah.
Wow, okay, so 5 minutes before it was supposed to start. Here we go. Game 2, and what's happening?
I know, and it just goes to show the players are eager to get back into the ring. And Artemiev has opened with his king's pawn, and Magnus has responded very aggressively.
Hi, David.
Hello, David.
Hi, everyone.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, well, wow. It started, David. Can you believe it? These players just did not want to wait those extra 5 minutes for game 2. And just reminding everyone, if Magnus wins this one, the final will be over. Vladislav Artemiev needs at least a draw. He has the white pieces. He's going to be looking for a win in this game.
Yeah, he's going to be looking for a win, and he's played a really, I want to say suspicious opening, but a really controversial opening at the very least. Look at this. White's king. It's only move 6, but it's given up the right to castle. White's king, after this check, has just shifted, and now Magnus, once he gets his pieces out, he will look at that white king as a potential target. Ivanka, a rare opening, especially at this top level. What do you think so far?
It is very rare. In fact, I did double once with this opening, and I only did it as a bit of a bluff. But having said that, I'm checking my database, and I'm seeing it has some pedigree. Sergei Karyakin, he played it against Alexander Grishuk in 2009. You won't be surprised by the next player who has played it 3 times. Alexander Morozovich, one of the most creative players that has been around in the chess world. And even Nigel Short tried this out with the white pieces in 1992.
Yep, I'm surprised that so many strong grandmasters have played this because personally, I just think White's chances aren't even that great, especially once you've moved the king. It's going to take you 3 or 4 moves to correct that situation, to maybe shift the white king towards the corner. Eventually, how are you going to get that white rook out in that right corner? Lots of questions to answer. I think some of those games might have been blitz games, but definitely Artemiev, he's come up with a new strategy. That's what he promised us in the interview yesterday. He said he's going to try something new, something different, something spectacular maybe. And look at Magnus. We're not used to seeing this from Magnus, actually. Head in hands at move 6, already thinking, already in pretty much new territory. And this is definitely something the world champion would never have guessed in a million years. Firstly, Artemiev never opened with his king's pawn on move 1, I think, throughout the tour. So first time for that. And secondly, to go for such a committal line, playing with fire with that white king at an early stage.
I think the players have been inspired by our quiz of the day, where we're asking, if you had your kingdom, who would be king and queen? Look at white's king on an unusual square. Look at black's queen, also doing some unusual things. So there you go. That's my explanation. And when it comes to answers, well, Du Ming Trang says that his king and queen in their kingdom would be Grandmasters Liam Le and his wife, beautiful and strong chess couple. And it's a beautiful picture of the two.
Yes.
And Cal says that their king would be King Kong and the queen would be Queen the Band. After all, it's Freddie Mercury's 75th birthday today.
Wow.
Is it?
Yeah, it would be good to see the king dance when the queen plays. Oh, I like it.
Yeah.
And Arbel Gideon says, I would obviously have David Howell as the king because he might be kind, but he can also be ruthless. He can. And I would have Little Hat, that's me, as the queen, as she will always find a way to get things done and done well. And
I like that description.
I know.
I think it's true.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that. But there we are, David, in our snow palace.
I know, we just need to trade those those winter hats for crowns, right? That's all we need.
Yeah, that was a fun moment during the season when you guys took the challenge and went ice dipping and did it well as well. Both of you.
Yeah, that's the best chess game I've played all year was when I was dipped in that ice.
I have to say that was one of the most surprising things in my life, actually. If anyone had said you would be taking cold showers every day, you'll be having an ice dip, I would have said, no way, Jose. But, you know, it happened, and I'm there. And we do also have a question from Mardi Ibrahim. Oh, hang on. Jeff Keller, sorry, my apologies. He says, do GMs frequently use their opponent's time to think when low on time?
Yes, and if you look at Artemiev now, he's definitely trying to work things out while Magnus is thinking. That's definitely a tip. Sometimes, OK, black's knight there, coming out, very sensible. But sometimes in over-the-board chess, you see the top players just get up, walk around, just maybe go and have a snack, maybe even chat to some friends. But in general, you should be concentrated. You definitely want to use your time, especially in the key games, especially when low on the clock, because every minute counts. And sometimes it's nice to get up and take a break and kind of see things with fresh eyes, with a fresh perspective at some point. But in general, there's no time to do that in rapid chess. You need to utilize your time, especially Artemiev, and that's why he's playing so quickly now. Magnus had a long 4-minute think, and Artemiev was ready with an almost immediate answer.
Yeah, I have to say that has surprised me a lot when I've been at over-the-board tournaments, watching the top players, and often they will get up after their move, walk around, and even like go over to other boards and look at their games and for many minutes. And I mean, that must be so confusing.
Yeah, it's just like somehow, you know, the brain is so vast and so complicated that you can actually just have a look at someone else's position and still have your own game in the back of your mind. OK, so we have seen a few trades. And now the queen steps backward. I must say, capturing the knight wasn't the most popular move. So I think Magnus is been a little bit disturbed by Artemiev's opening choice.
Yep. So voluntarily, black has given up the bishop pair. That means parting with his light square bishop with black just for one knight. I think Magnus just wants to survive this position. He knows he's only 1 point away now from winning the tournament. He only needs 1 point out of the last 3 games, and he's gone into solid mode. Especially with black, you don't necessarily want to take risks in an opening, in a strange kind of foreign opening that your opponent has clearly prepared beforehand. So Magnus just wants to get his pieces out to sensible squares. Here we go. The black knight bringing itself out. Black's pawn will push. Black's bishop will develop, and then black will castle. That's automatic over the next few turns. And maybe Magnus, we saw him with that 4-minute think earlier on. He was just thinking to himself. He was just saying, OK, I need to survive. I need a simple plan. And that can be quite a good idea in rapid chess. I don't like, personally, what he's done, giving up the bishop pair. White has chances now long-term in any type of endgame, which we know Artemiev loves. The bishops will be by far the best pieces, but we're far from an endgame right now. And while the queens live, white's king won't feel entirely safe, potentially. And, yeah, black doesn't have too many weaknesses. So roughly in the balance, I slightly prefer white, despite the king. And Artemiev, he needs to find a quick, decisive way to try and disturb black's very simple plan of development.
Yeah, just checking the database. Only 5 games actually played. And, well, white had some choices. First of all, develop the dark squared bishop. Another one was actually just to develop the white knight that is sitting at home. In fact, the white knight has even gone to the edge of the board, to the A3 square, in order to find a juicier destination. So lots of choice for white.
Yep. Either way, white's going to develop a piece, whether it's the dark squared bishop, whether it's the knight, but all those pieces on the left side sitting at home, asleep. So they need to re-centralize themselves, even if that means kind of temporarily sitting on a bad square, just relocating themselves towards the center. At some point, white's king will step forward off the bottom row just to clear a way for that white rook in the corner to slide towards the center. But Artemiev doesn't necessarily need to rush making a decision with his king. And, OK, time usage, great so far, Artemiev. He's just spending those 2-3 minutes to work out a mode of development.
OK, but a better start to this game for Artemiev. That's basically what you're saying.
Yeah, so far so good. He's got a slightly imbalanced position. In must-win situations, that's what you need. You need maybe a bishop for knight kind of disparity. You need a different type of pawn structure where it's not 100% symmetrical. He's got everything he could hope for from an opening here with white. It's just about that next step, kind of actually creating some action, actually creating some threats. OK, white's knight has found a decent square. Meanwhile, black's bishop is just going to develop. Magnus is barely going to think here, I think. There we go. I keep saying the word think, but yeah, I assume that black's plan is to castle his king over to that right side, away to safety.
Yeah. All right. Well, Artemiev definitely healthier when it comes to his clock in this game. He is up on the clock. We nearly never see Artemiev with more time left than his opponent. He has made Magnus think in this game, doing exactly what he told us yesterday, just bringing up something completely new.
Yeah, and Artemiev actually playing a very new move there. But it had been analysed last year in September. So
pushing Anna the A-pawn. Maybe he's learned from Magnus Carlsen in that last game. And actually, if you look at white's A-pawn there on the side, the further it pushes, the more dangerous it will become. Also, because black has parted with his light squared bishop, look at white's light squared bishop. It's on this long diagonal, and it covers a potential promotion square of Anna the A-pawn. So actually, that combination has won me countless games. Once you have your bishop on this long diagonal, push your corner pawn, push Anna up the board, and you will at least start to make your opponent feel uncomfortable. Maybe if it gets to the endgame, that pawn will become a queen as well. So decent strategy there long-term from Artemiev. He still needs to, however, develop white's dark squared bishop, that one not doing much, and he has to resolve the king situation.
All right. So you guys are exceptional at imagining, especially chessboards and games and moves. I know you can just see it in your head. And I just, when you mention Anna now, I'm just like remembering that last game, because I could really like envision a princess just walking up the board in that game, you know, and going into battle and about to become a queen, but sacrificing herself for the greater good of the country.
Yeah.
That's what I have in my head. That's what I imagine. I imagine a princess.
Yeah. And
someone should make a Disney movie out of that last game.
Yeah, I know.
Storyline. It's perfect.
Oh, it could be the follow-up to Elsa and Anna.
Frozen.
Yeah, Frozen. The follow-up.
But interestingly enough, Alice Through the Looking Glass is actually based on a chess game.
Really?
Yeah.
By Lewis Carroll. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, actually.
Tell me more.
How to explain it, Ivanka? There's fun, colourful characters represent different pieces. Her journey represents the kind of moves in the game, and
yeah, and she's actually a pawn.
Yeah.
And suddenly she keeps moving from squares to square, and then she finds herself in different terrain, and at the end she becomes a queen. And I
definitely recommend checking out the checking out the story. And also recently in London, in Trafalgar Square, one of the biggest kind of tourist landmarks in London, they held a giant chess game. So all of the pieces were played by actors, and they acted out a game according to the Alice Through the Looking Glass storyline.
Wow.
So it's really fascinating.
It's a beautiful book. I really recommend that you read both of them. It's a bit random. It's a bit crazy.
A bit surreal.
Yeah, totally. But
it doesn't have notation and stuff. It's like a real.
Well, you can go
story.
at the end of the book.
Really?
You can play through the game. Yeah.
Is it based on an actual chess game that was played?
I'm not 100%
I'm
sure,
not
actually.
sure, actually.
Maybe you can check that out, Jovanka. But I remember reading it when I was very young and playing through the game, and I thought, oh, chess is pretty cool, actually. There's so many different storylines you can tell yourself throughout the game, and maybe it's a way to memorize. I mean, it's hard to memorize every single Grandmaster game, but if there are certain model games that you think you have learned a lot from, then making a storyline for yourself will help you remember, of course. So. Yeah, Alice Through the Looking Glass.
Okay.
Maybe we should have called her Alice the Acorn.
Oh, yes,
we missed the trick there.
We can change it.
I was thinking Anna because the King and I think the character was called Anna.
I've been thinking about Frozen. Elsa and Anna.
Different levels, huh?
Yeah. But maybe you should stick to Alice.
Alice, yeah.
I'd love that.
And do you know what I would do right now, Kaya? If I were Artemiev, I would
Push Anna.
push her up the
Anna.
board.
No, Alice, sorry.
Or push Alice, push Anna, push that A-pawn up the board one more square. Try to break open this light square diagonal for white's bishop. Yeah, it's all about that white bishop right now. It's the only uncontested bishop. So if you can lengthen its diagonal by pushing a pawn forward, destabilising black's pawn structure over on that left flank, I think Artemiev has a great position, but he's hesitating. A long, long think now, burning up that time advantage he previously had.
Not good, not good. Thinking for 4 minutes now, Artemiev is not in a must-win situation yet, but if this is a draw, then he's going to be in a must-win situation. So having the white pieces, you know, you can see it on him. He's just desperately looking for a win in this game.
Yeah. We have to remind ourselves, you know, he has been in this position before in the Gold Money semi-finals against Dingler.
True.
He lost the first match in 3 games, and then he also lost the first game of the second match, and he drew the second, and so he found himself in this must-win situation, and he did it.
But he did not push Alice, though.
No, he didn't. He pushed Charlie. The C-pawn. I struggle with the name there.
Looking for chocolate.
Yes.
Oh, all the stories. And yeah, this one is a decent move as well. It does control the black knight. The black knight maybe wanted to jump into the centre of the board, so white's just staking out his turf, staking out his territory, trying to control all his squares. Actually, on the first 4 rows, white has controlled every single square. So that's decent. I mean, that's kind of keeping control. It's a control type of move. But pushing Alice or Anna would have been maybe a more direct type of move. Look out for that one later. Maybe Alice just needed a timeout to prepare, just to ready her nerves for that charge forward.
I feel like there is a song with Alice.
There is, but
what song? Is there a bad song?
Well, it kind of asks who she is.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's true. Who on earth is Alice?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And no, I mean, I'm a bit puzzled by Artemiev's last move, if I have to say something. I mean, first of all, I understand that pawn move.
There she goes. That pawn pushes forward again.
But it comes at the potential cost of a pawn. So we really do need to do a little bit of a deep dive here. I mean, to everyone was asking, hey, what happens after queen takes pawn? It's just a gift.
Yep, it looks like Artemiev has given Magnus a gift, but this gift is not wrapped, that it does come with poison inside, because if black takes a free pawn, trades off the queens, then suddenly, after the black rook jumps forward, it looks like you're attacking this bishop, white's king will say, OK, I'm meeting this threat with a threat myself. I'll guard the bishop, attack your rook, and wherever the black rook goes to, wherever you retreat to, for example, stepping back to a safe square, suddenly Alice steps forward again. And together with her bishop, she's completely destabilised black along this diagonal. And actually, you can't even pick up this pawn now as black. You can't, for example, take Alice off the board. She will again have sacrificed herself for a knight. And now white would win the black knight. And in this process, white's bishop just becomes too strong. And actually, this is a nightmare scenario for black after Alice pushes forward, because if you can't move this pawn, it simply drops off on the next turn. There's too much danger along this diagonal. I think this would actually lead to an almost winning position for white, or at least strategically dominant position, because most likely you win your pawn back and you will maintain the bishop pair. And because it's an endgame, Artemiev will be extremely happy. So right now, I think Magnus, he has to avoid the temptation of grabbing this pawn. Personally, I would just kind of play a bit of a waiting move. Maybe, for example, you could plant your knight in the center just to blunt the bishop's diagonal. The bishop now staring at a knight, never wants to trade itself off. And here, Magnus is still super solid, but this pawn push, pushing Alice up the board, has definitely given the world champion something to think about.
Okay. Yeah, look at that. He is going under 9 minutes as well.
Wow,
He does it.
He's just trying to resolve the tension. Magnus calling Artemiev's bluff. I said it's almost winning. I think maybe that I was exaggerating slightly because I just love White's position so much. Here we go, White's king stepping forward as predicted. But Black is certainly going to be on the defensive. Watch her go now. She's going to step up the board again, that A-pawn. That's the only way to justify White's sacrifice, surely.
Right, so he's just banking on the fact that once that pawn steps forward, that the knight that's sitting there on f6 can actually block this long diagonal.
Yeah, he's going to try and block White's light squared bishop. That's the key piece. If White can keep that bishop on its diagonal, then White's just going to win, simply. So, okay, there she goes. Now, that pawn, remember, it's taboo. It's forbidden. You can't touch that pawn because Black's knight will drop off to the white bishop, so you have to block its diagonal.
Yeah.
Now we see a trade, so, she's given up her life.
I know.
But she has, in the process, ruined Black's pawn structure on that left flank, so she's given the rest of her pieces more targets in the enemy's camp.
What a hero Alice is.
I know, it's kind of almost like karmic justice. Like if, say, Artemiev were to win this game, it would be because of the advance of the A-pawn. And meanwhile, Magnus definitely won his game because of this aggressive pawn advance.
Yeah, tragic heroine, just giving up her life. But now, I think great chances for White. Even though White's a pawn down, the two bishops combined, White's rook on this open A-line now. Just so many strong compensating factors for the pawn deficit.
Definitely some nice pressure. I really love this position for Artemiev, and I agree with you. The pawn deficit really doesn't matter so much because just look at White's bishop sitting there on f3, so much control over the light squares. I was maybe even think about introducing my rook on h1 that isn't doing too much, move it to the center.
Yep, that looks like a good move. White can move the dark squared bishop. White can even move the rook on the A line up the board, but why not bring a piece into the game that isn't doing too much? So, yeah, I like Jovanka's move. Bring that rook in the corner, swing it to the centre, and just increase the pressure move by move. Artemiev, if he doesn't win this game, he himself will feel that he doesn't necessarily deserve to win the final because this is his type of position, and you need to capitalise on your strengths in this tournament against the world's elite. It's an endgame, remember. That's where he thrives. We've seen in the Aimchess stats. That's by far his best segment of the game. And now that the queens are off, we are in that phase. And also, it's not just an endgame. It's a long-term, kind of just desirable... there's so many good things about White's position. He can grind this one away forever. And Magnus just has to sit and curl up into a ball, just defend everything. Yeah. Black has an extra pawn to suffer for, but it won't be much fun for the world champion.
But that time, though, 2 minutes now, Artemiev, is this a good time to spend that time? Is it a critical moment, or are you still asking him, David, to speed up?
Definitely speed up. I mean, there are certain moves that kind of suggest themselves, improving the rooks for one of them. I just don't think you need to spend so much time here. And what is the clock times? Let's have a look. Yeah, he's just under the clock, 6 minutes. I mean, we have seen Artemiev be incredibly resourceful and resilient and play the endgame incredibly well with just seconds left on the clock. But still, bearing in mind that he has to win, it's slightly impractical.
Yeah. Inside as well, it's already at that stage. It's happened so many times. His kind of dropping low on the clock that in his mind he's going to be saying, speed up, speed up, speed up, speed up. And that's going to distract him from actually looking at the moves. So he knows he has to play quicker, but it does look like he's frozen, to quote the show. Okay, the rook has gone to attack Black's undefended knight.
This is a good move.
Yeah. So Black's knight has to be guarded. It doesn't have many squares to run to. Maybe it can retreat. Okay, Magnus with the decision to make.
No retreat.
No retreat?
No.
Okay.
I mean...
I think there will be a retreat. I'm not going to make a bet. I'm not brave enough to do that, but I do have a feeling that Magnus is going to step that Black knight back to its start square, actually, where it began the game, in order to try and evict White's strong rook from his half. Where do you think? How do you think he'll defend that knight, Jovanka, with a rook?
Yes.
Black's rooks, one of the two rooks could go behind that Black knight and guard it. That would make some sense as well. Okay, moment of truth for Magnus.
Yeah. All right, he looks calm. He looks focused, Magnus Carlsen. And
oh, David, it's a shame that you didn't offer that bet because you would have won.
The first time I would have ever won a bet. I missed the chance. Not brave enough. That's. I just felt that again, that's Magnus's style in this game at least. He played that queen takes pawn move that I said, don't rush, don't be hasty, don't play it, don't get tempted. And now he just went for the most direct route one option. And again, here, rather than just slowly defend, he's trying to create threats on every turn, Magnus. He maybe knows he's close to that finishing line now in the final. He stepped back with the knight, forcing the white rook back. He's trying to play forcing chess, Magnus. It seems like that's his calling card in this game. So white's rook has stepped back to a safe square.
So does Artemiev now just has to make a new plan?
Yep.
He spent a lot of time.
Yeah.
And now he just has to reroute.
Well, I think the plan is still very much there, that he's going to try to attack those weak pawns that black has on the left side of the board. And of course, try to dominate the position in the middle with his light squared bishop.
But I think Kaya's point, though, is very relevant, right? Like, he spent, 3 minutes just making this plan, and it hasn't changed that much.
No,
his plan's still exactly the same as they should have been, or that they were 2 moves ago. So this game won't be decided right now on just on the back of 1 or 2 moves. It will just be decided over the course of 5, 6, 7 move maneuver. And
definitely.
Yeah, I still like white's position, ignoring the clocks temporarily. I think white has the next 2 or 3 moves. They're just pretty automatic. Either you bring that white rook in the bottom corner, you swing it across to the centre, or you move white's dark square bishop up and then kind of team up the 2 rooks on this A line that have been vacated by Alice. And, Magnus, meanwhile, he's trying to relocate the black knight to challenge white's knight. Actually, white's knight, look at it, it's on an outpost right now. It can never be kicked away by a pawn, and it's just too strong. So you have to try and trade it off.
OK, and the players developing their pieces.
Yeah, so white's rook now in the corner is threatening to swing the whole way across, and those 2 rooks stacking up, eyeing up a weak black pawn. Black's counterpart to Alice is a big, big target.
Yeah, that looks dangerous. So is that what he just should have done from the start?
Yeah, it's pretty automatic. If you gave Artemiev this position in a bullet game where he only has 1 minute on the clock, I think he would have done the same thing. And that's why human instincts, you just have to trust it sometimes, but it's hard to do it. He's an overthinker, he's a perfectionist, which is a very good thing in general for chess. But in speed chess and rapid, you've got to find a good balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And whilst Magnus is thinking about his position, for our quiz of the day, we're asking, if you had your kingdom, who would be the king and queen? And Du Ming Trang says, this is my king and queen. No one can beat me. There you see Magnus and Hikaru. Nice. And Kyle Akalu gets quite romantic. He says, my wife would be my queen because she makes me feel like a king. Oh. Yeah. And if you too want to enter our quiz of the day, then you can do so by tweeting us using the hashtag #ChessChamps, or by going onto the Champions Chess Tour page on Instagram and posting your answer there. Remember, Magnus just needs 1 point for the win. So this match could end any time now.
Yeah. Is this a game that is most likely a draw, or is any result possible? Do you think it's going to be a win for someone? What do you think right now?
I think if someone is going to win it, I think it will be Artemiev. He has the pressure. But we've seen Magnus turn around worse positions, so...
Absolutely.
Yep. All 3 results possible. Short term, white is the one having all the fun. White will create the threats. But long term, if black is able to defend against all the threats, just kind of keep his extra pawn, trade off, for example, white's strongest pieces, the white knight and the white light square bishop, then black might have some chances. But right now, it's definitely Artemiev creating the momentum. And, he's brought those 2 white rooks across, eyeing up a black pawn, and Magnus has said, I know that pawn is hanging, I know that you're about to take a pawn back, but I desperately want to trade off the knights first. And I think this is what Magnus had to do. White's knight was simply, just imperious. It was just a perfect piece, and I don't think Artemiev will trade. I don't think white can allow his knight to drop off the board. He needs to keep it intact. Usually, as well, you want one of everything. You want all the different types of pieces. I've made a ice cream flavor analogy in the past where it's much better to have a strawberry, chocolate, peanut, all these types of things. But as soon as you start only having bishops, then suddenly play becomes one-dimensional. If you only have rooks, play becomes one-dimensional. So keeping the pieces on can be quite important. You want a knight in order to maybe find these different angles later on. But OK, he actually retreats his knight, allowing a trade, but he didn't trade in a kind of way that would ruin his position. If he'd taken off Black's knight, Black would have taken with a pawn and brought his pawn towards the centre. So Artemiev is saying, yes, we can trade. You can get rid of one of my ice cream flavours, but it's going to be on my terms.
Yeah, and it seemed like Magnus was a little bit frustrated with that he wants the knights off, but not in this way.
Yeah, he frowned, actually, because, again, Artemiev is saying, hey, I'm putting pressure on your knight on the centre of the board. I'm playing on the light squares. But at the same time, I'm also attacking this weak pawn on A7. So Magnus now has a tricky decision. Does he defend this pawn with everything he's got, or try to find counterplay in another way?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, first thing I'd do, Jovanka, I'd take those knights off just because I don't want to allow White to keep those knights on the board. For example, if you take a timeout now, Black defending that A-pawn against the threat of White's rooks, then White has the time and the opportunity to move the knights away from the trade. But I would probably take the knights off and then try and defend my pawn. It's ugly, it's defensive, it's passive for Black, but maybe I can just show as well, while Magnus is thinking quite a long think, and time is balanced out, by the way, both players down now at 4 minutes. What I would do, I'm not sure about you, Jovanka, but I would trade knights. I'd take this knight off, and once I think the white bishop will most likely recapture, I would just retreat. And yes, it's a bad piece, but you're clinging on to the only good thing in the Black's position, which is the extra pawn.
Yeah. And it makes some sense. OK, yes, I agree. Totally ugly. Knight on the back row doing absolutely nothing other than defending the pawn. But then take a look at White's rooks. They're only doing one thing as well. You know, they're just putting pressure on that weak pawn. So I like your suggestion. And we're maybe going to see it on the board. In fact, I'm pretty sure we're going to see it.
Yeah, so this is the move we're expecting, the Black Knight to go back. Magnus has played it. I think that was just a necessity. The more I looked at it, the more I think there was just no other option. You cannot allow White's rooks to invade. It's not just the fact a pawn would drop off, but also the rooks would reach the 7th row. They would start conquering Black's 7th rank. And that's why the knight has stepped back. And actually, White has pretty much a perfect position. All the pieces have been maximised. These two bishops, they look like they're on the perfect squares. The rooks look like they're on the perfect squares. But the question is, what next? And Black has guarded all his weaknesses for now. And, OK, maybe it's time to start improving some of these pieces. Jovanka, you mentioned the rooks. OK, maybe one rook could go this way, but first he's brought the other rook up the board, just blockading this pawn, just controlling the 6th rank with his rook. Maybe Artemiev's plan could involve, next move, starting to push some pawns forward, starting to bring his king into the action, depending on how brave he's feeling. And Magnus
says, no, absolutely not. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, so he's...
I like it.
Yeah, this last pawn move, clamping down on the side that Black's actually stronger. Black has a 4 versus 3 advantage on the right half of the board, so that's where he's pushing pawns, not allowing White to push forward with his pawns. OK, interesting from Magnus. I still prefer White's position, but Black is very solid. Yeah,
Black is very solid. And another benefit of that pawn advance is that it actually controls the dark square bishop. It's got no squares, that bishop.
Yeah, this bishop now literally no squares. It's eyeing up some pawns, but those pawns are both protected by Black's bishop. So it's a bit of a game of kind of guardian, and this Black bishop doing this guardian role is definitely keeping White's dark square bishop under lock and key. Should
Magnus get a little bit excited and say, hey, I'm a pawn up, and I have a solid position, maybe I can think for...
pushing some pawns later.
Getting more from the position. OK, we have seen a trade of rooks.
Yeah, we have seen this trade, and now White does have... OK, the Black king stepping forward. White does have a route in for his king at some point. This is one thing I think we might well see from Artemiev later. Also, the White rook will try and find its way into the position. Maybe this would involve bringing the White bishop back and then kind of doing a slow march into Black's half, into Black's camp. Actually, this looks pretty tempting to me. It's hard for Black to stop this, actually, this type of plan. OK, let's see Artemiev down at 3 minutes now against Carlsen's 4.5 minutes. Oof, time is ticking and nerves are going to be jangling. Magnus still on the back foot, on the defensive. White still a pawn down, but with beautiful pieces, beautiful bishops.
Going under 3 minutes, Vladislav Artemiev. He's not in a must-win situation, but he is definitely in a should-win situation. If this is a draw, then the next game will be a must-win situation. If Magnus wins, it's going to be over.
Okay, so. And the rook jumps up the board to attack a pawn, and Magnus instantly responds by protecting his pawn on the right. Okay.
Actually, this is maybe even stronger than the moves or the ideas I was suggesting. White's immediately going to try and win back his pawn. White can restore the material balance now by taking this pawn. He's done it. And, OK, after this trade of bishops, you've actually parted with the bishop pair as White. Normally, bishops work better together. So that's a bit of a downside. But if you look at the left now, White has a 2 versus 1 advantage. And how is Black going to stop White's pawns on that flank? Black's king is ages away. It's going to take too long to bring that Black king over to stop White's pawns. They can start advancing now.
But, I mean, those Black pawns are kind of far advanced, though.
True, but they have more rivals maybe to block. If you look at White's pawn on the C line, on the same file as the White rook and bishop, that guy, if you get the rook and bishop out of the way, it's going to start to run. It's got no block, no pawns to stop it.
And that's just what Artemiev has done. The pawn is now thinking about running, and Magnus now introducing his king into the battle. It looks quite unpleasant for Magnus now. Yeah,
it's unpleasant, but this last move by Magnus, very nice, good endgame strategy to bring the king closer towards the centre. This is where those endgame stats, they're being put to the test. We saw the Aimchess stats between the two. Artemiev winning, what was it, 67% of his endgames, or very high number there.
Yeah. OK, David, I have a question for you. So here at the minute you see is rook and knight against rook and bishop. Say Black were to offer the trade of rooks. Should White say, yes, please?
Maybe. Depends on the circumstances. If it costs Black a bit of time to initiate that trade, then I think, yeah, you're fine with it with White. With pawns on both sides, bishops tend to be better pieces, and the Black knight doesn't necessarily have any outposts.
OK.
And, OK, White's starting the pawn race. He's stepping forward with his pawns, and, yeah, I think if Black now brings his rook across to offer the trade, I would... OK, he doesn't do that. I would have said yes, and then brought the White king, rushed it forward. But Black, meanwhile, just keeping his rook on a safe defensive square, guarding the Black knight. Also, now it's harder for White to bring the White king over to the left side of the board because Black will have control over this D-line. White's king needs to cross that line in order to get there.
And the time is ticking for Artemiev, now just under 1.5 minutes. But still a really lovely position.
Yeah, and he's pushed a pawn forward. Normally that is not advisable to put pawns on the same colour as your bishop, also weakening some squares. But the short-term idea is that Black's knight now has lost some scope. Its circuit into better squares, into the centre, has been restricted. So White's pawn push there, just taking 1 square away from the Black knight, also stopping the Black pawn advance on the side that Black is stronger on that right half of the board. And, OK, Magnus, what move is he going to go for? I don't see a plan for Black. Maybe Black just has to sit and wait. The Black king, it's on its ideal square. It can't come further forward because White's rook is cutting it off. Black's king, if it steps back, might walk into a check. Black's rook, I mean, it's not clear that you can improve that piece. The Black knight as well, lacking squares. I really like this last move by Artemiev, I must say. Endgame, endgame magician.
Yeah, I like it. Improving on all sides of the board. Just keeping Black on the back foot. OK, Magnus steps forward with his rook.
Yeah, simply nothing else to do for Black. That Black rook was just kind of locked in behind its own knight, but the knight had no great squares to go to either.
Do you think Magnus is now feeling the pressure? Is he feeling nervous? Is he looking, thinking this could be a loss?
For sure.
For sure.
Yeah, I think if we were to talk to Magnus immediately after this game, it might not be possible, but if we were to talk about this game, he will regret that queen trade earlier in the game, a long, long time ago. But that initiated all of this. That was the root of all his problems, Magnus, that earlier queen trade. And we talked about White's light squared bishop being unrivaled. That happened on move 7, move 8. Black gave up his light squared bishop and White remaining with his strongest piece, with the best minor piece. By far right now, the bishop is stronger than the knight.
And it's just, we've seen it so many times that when someone is able to make a comeback on day 2, then it just starts rolling. And then we get into those tie breaks. It feels like it's like that every time.
Yeah, sometimes it's all about just taking that first point, taking that psychological breakthrough. And once you've done that, then suddenly then suddenly maybe, you win the second game of the match. But we have noticed a trend, haven't we, David? That the person who makes the comeback on day 2 tends to lose the tie breaks.
Yeah, I think maybe it's just a psychological thing. You put all your energy into fighting back, and once you've fought back, equalise the scores, then suddenly it's hard to keep that energy level. You relax a bit when the blitz games start, and you just can't. You just can't continue with the same speed, the same force.
And Magnus retreating with his king, and Artemiev stepping forward with the rook. Looks really lovely for Artemiev. Those 2 pawns are just going to walk and hold hands. It's difficult to suggest a kind of defensive plan. I'm not even thinking about active plan for Magnus.
I think Magnus has finally stumbled across a plan. He had nothing else, basically. Black was completely stuck, boxed up, paralysed. The black pieces there in the middle, those 3 pieces, just lacking energy. So now, with this last pawn push, it looks like he's not doing much, but he's created a square for the black knight to retreat to, so that black knight can drop back to where the pawn previously stood and then maybe re-centralise itself. The black knight was about to get attacked as well by some pawns, so it has found a route maybe towards the centre. So black's knight will slide back next to the white king, next to the black king. And the clock time's Kaya, you're about to say.
Absolutely.
Scary for Artemiev, and that's why he hasn't made a big decision. He's just kind of biding time with the white bishop retreating, and this is the manoeuvre I was talking about, black's knight trying to reroute itself. I think without this, Magnus would have just been crushed, simply nothing else to do. He would have had to sit and await his fate. But now at least one plan. The black knight is coming towards the middle of the board. He's going to start attacking the white rook, attacking some pawns maybe.
Not so much time left on the clock. It was 10 seconds left at some point. OK, and the knight now centralises itself and is attacking a pawn.
Artemiev, he's losing control.
Oh. Yeah, but he can push a pawn, right? And everything is still OK.
Yeah, I mean, he has to.
5 seconds.
No.
No. OK, what?
What is he doing?
OK, so he's attacked the black rook with his bishop. But that bishop, firstly, it could be captured. Secondly, the black rook can just step to the side and hit it and attack that bishop.
And this is what he does. He just...
Yeah, and now one of his pawns has disappeared. He's completely lost control, Artemiev. He's panicked, and he's trying not to show it on his face, but now it's level pawns. One of his pride and joys, one of those pawns has dropped, however, and this is headed towards a draw immediately. He's lost both of his pawns on that left side. He's traded off his superior bishop for a knight. 3 versus 3 on the same side with pawns now. It's a dead draw.
Yeah.
No way through.
And the players are repeating moves.
Oh, that is so bad news for Vladislav Artemiev. Yeah.
Golden opportunity for him to get something more. But, I mean, what can we say? It was also great defensive work by Magnus Carlsen, especially that knight manoeuvre.
Yeah.
Yeah, great defensive work, but it's the clock. It's just the clock. We saw the panic in his play on his face, and that's what cost Artemiev his winning chances.
Yep. And now it's going to be a must-win situation for Artemiev in Game 3 coming up in 15 minutes. So now let's take a look at this game, the FTX exchange of today.
The moral of the story of this game was that just because you can exchange doesn't mean you should exchange. And here, Magnus Carlsen, he spotted that he could win a pawn, and he exchanged the queens. He took this pawn with check, and after this exchange of queens, he realised after the white king steps forward, the black rook forced back, that white pawn is now causing some real damage, some real mischief. And actually, it's the pawn combined with the bishop that gives white an advantage. Black was forced to block off this white bishop with his knight, block its diagonal, but even after a trade of pawns, we saw that black came under heavy pressure. White pieces pouring forward, creating threats, and just too many weaknesses in black's camp. If we look at the weaknesses, an isolated pawn here, an isolated pawn here, the whole queen exchange, the whole process led to a really difficult position for Magnus Carlsen.
Game 3 will be a must-win situation for Artemiev. Any other result, and Magnus Carlsen will be the winner of the Aimchess US Rapid, and the world champion will have the white pieces in Game 3 in the final of the Aimchess US Rapid.
I'm ahead of the game. Well, the phone is always ringing. I'm caught up on the line. Got a string around my finger. Remember who am I? I'm a boss and I'm honestly off my rocker, but follow me. I'm ahead of the game. I'm ahead of the game.
what a great tool Aimchess is to improve your chess. And every day in this show, David has analyzed one of you at home's online performance. And we have come to the last viewer that you will analyze, David. Who is the lucky one?
So today it's the turn of Arihant Lunia, and I've checked out Arihant's profile on Chess24. Arihant is rated around 12 to 1300 on Chess24. That's actually the ideal rating to make the most out of Aimchess. Aimchess, I think, definitely a useful tool for all players, but especially players under 2000, under 2200. And here we see some of the overall stats, some of the same categories as well that we've seen for the top players in the world. Opening stage, Arihant's doing pretty well, 60% accuracy here, slightly below the average for players of a similar rating, but still very decent. Time management, very quick. This is one thing Arihant maybe has the edge on players like Artemia, for example. Very quick, very good use of the clock in general. Resourcefulness, also pretty decent. Advantage capitalization, slightly below the average, but still decent. It is, however, on endings that Arihant, I feel, needs to work on. Only 38% win rate in endgames and 45% in tactics. Those two areas of the game can be sorted out. Go to Chess24, go to Chessable, work on those endgames, work on those puzzles. And here, if Arihant wants to go into more detail, you can review the games and check out some personalized lessons. Also, the win rate with white, I noticed, was very low for Arihant relative to his performance or her performance with the black pieces. Doing very well with black, 58% is a very decent score with the black pieces at any level, but with white, work needs to be done, especially on those openings. And talking of openings, let's check out some opening stats. And I've looked at the most popular openings that feature in Arihant's games. I've seen King's Pawn openings struggling here. Also, Queen's Pawn games seem to be the big strength. A 13 plus 13 advantage in general average for Queen's Pawn games, so it seems like that should be where you should be focusing, Arihant.
That must be a great thing to actually learn, to figure, okay, I should use that pawn when I start the game.
Exactly, and it's not just the exact pawn move, but it's also the variation later. We see different variations of the Queen's Gambit, for example, some stronger or some weaker than others. The Queen's Gambit refused, not doing so well, but the Queen's Pawn openings doing much, much better. So definitely some comparison here would be useful. And again, more details if you click on some of these links. Many more interesting stats to be seen. And if we check out advantage capitalization, this is one area I feel Arihant does very well. 93% win rate when having a +4 advantage, that is fantastic. 82% when having a +3 advantage, this is also fantastic. So this part of the game, one of Arihant's strengths, but resourcefulness maybe can be slightly improved, especially in positions when struggling big time, having a -4 disadvantage, not saving as many of those as compared to the average of this rating. And as usual, our favorite stats. I just want to show this. Firstly, okay, endgames can be worked on. I recommend Arihant to check out some of these stats. Equal endgames, for example, not winning any games in equal positions. That is a bit worrying, but it is down. In these win rate per weekday stats that I found really, really fascinating. Arihant actually spreads things out throughout the week. That's healthy, but according to Aimchess, you should be worried about playing on Tuesdays and playing on Saturdays. Not the highest win rate there.
What is your best and worst day when you checked your Aimchess stats, David?
I think it's the weekend.
The weekend is the best?
Yes. During the week, maybe I'm just a bit too stressed. Maybe I'm not fully focused. Got other things to do. But weekends, clear mind and best results.
How about you, Houska?
Mine was the weekend. It told me to stay away from Saturdays. Not doing well there.
All right. Well, for Arihant, we did learn that he needed to work particularly on his end game. And we're looking back on the 2021 Meltwater Champions Chess Tour season. One of my favorite Howell's how-to videos is not about the end game, but it is about beautiful checkmates.
Some checkmates are more beautiful than others. And by beautiful, we normally mean unexpected moves that lead to checkmate. The situation looked dire for Magnus. Black's queen and Black's rook combine to threaten the white king. If it's Black's move, Black would deliver checkmate by moving his queen across and trapping the white king. Therefore, time is of the essence. White needs to act quickly. He needs to find there's only one move that doesn't lose. It also happens to deliver checkmate. And that was the move by Magnus Carlsen, queen to h6 check, sacrificing the queen on an empty square. That's so rare. Black has two possible replies. Black can capture the queen with the pawn or with the king. If he captures the queen with the pawn, White's rook comes down and delivers checkmate. Black's king is trapped. It cannot jump forward because of the white pawn, and it cannot retreat because White's other rook keeps it trapped. If Black had captured the queen with his king after White gave the check, then the other rook would zoom across and give checkmate. Black's king is trapped. It cannot retreat because its pawn is blocking its retreat square, and the white pawn stops it from moving to the side. White's rooks and pawn combine to give checkmate. This gave Magnus Carlsen the World Championship title in 2016. One of those most beautiful checkmates of all time occurred in something that we now call the immortal game. This was played in 1851 between Adolf Andersen and Kieritzky. In this position, White is 2 rooks down. White has sacrificed both of his rooks. Black's queen captured a rook in the corner, and Black's bishop has also captured a rook. However, White's pieces have swarmed towards the Black king. Black's king is defenseless. Note that Black's queen is nowhere near the defense. Meanwhile, White has bishop, a knight, and this other knight very close to the Black king. In order to finish the game, though, Andersen needed a sacrifice. He needed to lure Black's knight away from the defense of a very important square. Therefore, White sacrificed his queen. He brought his queen forward, giving check to the Black king. It did look like this was a mistake at first, because Black could capture the white queen. Black is now a queen and 2 rooks ahead. However, White now gave check with the bishop. The bishop is protected by White's knight, and Black's king is trapped within its own forces. White's knight stops the king from running away, and together the bishop and the 2 knights trap the Black king for a stunning checkmate. A beautiful game, lots of beautiful sacrifices, and I definitely recommend checking it out.
A beautiful game there that David showed us in the Howell's How To. And in the question of today, do we have some more answers?
Yeah, we are asking, if you had your kingdom, who would be the king and queen? And Nazri Nesnas says, I would have taken Freddie Mercury, whose 75th birthday would have been today. And
wow,
he's both the king champion of the world with his iconic voice, and he is most certainly queen. I like that answer. But I can just see that the players have already started. Yeah. They're not giving us a break.
Okay, so the rule is that they have 15 minutes in between games. These two must have had an agreement to only have 10 minutes, because here we go, game 3, David.
Yep, breathless action. And
yeah.
It's the Sicilian defense, and yeah, one of the most counter-attacking openings for Black. Remember, Artemiev needs to win. And right now, he is thinking he needs to pick a variation. Will it be the Sicilian Knight-off? Will it be... Yes, it is the Sicilian Knight-off. He doesn't choose the Dragon, the Shaven England, the Classical. So many branches of the Sicilian he could have picked, but he chooses the most popular opening in chess, pretty much. And, OK, it's down to Magnus. How is he going to try and shut down this game, or is he going to play for the win, the world champion, despite the fact he only needs a draw? Yeah,
must-win situation for Artemiev. He has to win this one and the next one to take it to tie breaks. Magnus Carlsen, a draw here is enough. Is it too early to say what he's going for? The next moves maybe will show us?
I think over the next 4 or 5 moves, we'll see what both players want to do, what their strategies are. And right now, actually, this is the start position of the Knight-off. I think White has about 10, at least 10 to 13 moves, which are very viable, very playable. So that's why I've always steered clear of the Sicilian Knight-off. There's just too much to learn, too much to know. But that's also what attracts players to the Knight-off. You can freestyle, you can put your own personal spin on things, you can try different avenues of attack.
Talking about putting his own personal spin on things, Magnus has actually played a variety of moves. I'll just check in the database. He's developed his dark square bishop 2 squares, and also done a rather funky queen move where he's moved the queen 2 squares. Now he chooses to develop his light square bishop.
Yep. So one of the most traditional moves, one of the most calm, kind of composed moves you can play in the Sicilian Knight-off, just developing the bishop, getting ready to castle the white king. If he was in a wilder mood, if Magnus needed to win at all costs, we would have seen maybe some of the ideas that Jovanka suggested, the white queen coming out, White pushing a pawn, or White bringing his other bishop out into the game. But no, Magnus knows he just needs to keep things calm and solid. and not take too many risks. I'm slightly surprised, to be honest, that Magnus did go for the open Sicilian, which means there wasn't a trade of pawns earlier in the game, especially in this type of situation. We've seen him go for other lines where you don't give black any open diagonals, open lines at all. So, yeah, a slightly surprising decision from Magnus, but now it's back to Artemiev. What is he going to choose? He normally actually steers clear of this himself with black. He plays the Sicilian regularly, but not this branch, not this variation. It's too mainstream for him normally. Normally he likes to take things into maybe more unexplored waters, but no, Artemiev, he mentioned he's changing up his opening strategy. And talking of changing things up, we went from the Sicilian knight-off, which is to push black's A pawn there, but now black has pushed another pawn, and this is going to be a hybrid of the Sicilian knight-off and the Sicilian dragon, and it's what we call the Dragadorf.
I know, it was a favourite of Simon Williams for a long time.
Yeah, our good friend Ginger GM, he was one of the forerunners, one of the most influential players of this type of setup, of this type of opening. So maybe, has Artemiev been studying the games of Ginger GM? We will find out. This last pawn push by Magnus Carlsen, however, is quite ambitious. He's aiming to push everything forward on this right flank in anticipation of the fact that that's where black wants to castle his king. So Magnus actually, with this last move, he has shown us he's not just playing for the draw. He wants to have some fun. He wants to play the most principled types of variations that we can see in the Sicilian.
All right. That, I must say, that, you know, historically seems to be the best idea for Magnus, the best intention.
Yeah, when he plays passively for a draw, sometimes he doesn't get it. Sometimes he just makes negative decisions and they backfire.
And talking about decisions, well, Artemiev has a whole range of moves available to him. You know, Magnus has pushed up his pawn to the g4 square. One response could be to develop dark square bishop, one square. Another one is to say, hey, I don't want that pawn to go any further. So he can pick up his h pawn and move it one square. That's on the board. Another alternative was actually to provoke that pawn to come forward and push the h pawn two squares. But, OK.
So very sensible move there from Artemiev, not wanting to see white's pawns expand further. White's pawns were actually aiming to dislodge the only piece that black's developed. Black has only brought one knight out, and white was trying to kick that knight further back. So this is sensible from Artemiev, just keeping control of any potential incursions into his half. Now I expect to see Magnus continue with piece development. One thing Magnus... OK, he does bring his bishop out. One thing Magnus can't do, and definitely won't do, is castle the white king over to the right side now. He's just weakened that flank too much. His king would be too exposed now that he's pushed some pawns on that same side. So white's king is destined to go long. It's going to go on the left of the board, and yeah, things are going to get spicy. This game is going to heat up. Every Sicilian defence is just crazy in a different way, and always we reach unique positions quite early on, definitely with attacking chances for white, but counter-attacking chances for black. Yeah. Black just needs to survive and develop pieces in the early onslaught, and then later on he can aim for more ambitious ideas.
And I feel like both sides will be a little bit off balance here, because I've listened to interviews with Magnus. He doesn't necessarily like playing these super sharp open Sicilians either. And Artemiev, judging by his style, likes to shy away from direct conflict. But here, we are in for a full-blooded fight. Yeah,
I would say, though, as you mentioned, Jovanka, this is neither player's kind of comfort zone, their home territory, but Magnus has a lot of experience in open Sicilians. Artemiev, much, much less so. Yeah. Artemiev has nearly never played this opening from the white side and seldom plays this opening or this branch of the Sicilian from the black side. So Artemiev definitely trying something new. He knows he needs to. What he's been doing so far hasn't worked. And that's just good advice for any player. If your strategy isn't working, if you're banging your head against that door and you're not breaking through, just freshen things up, try something new. And Artemiev, we mentioned maybe less experience, but he's trying something ambitious. He's pushing pawns now. That black pawn will aim to march one square further down the board and destabilise white's knights this time. I like this move. Maybe it's too soon, maybe not. Maybe black is ready for it, but either way, Magnus has to decide where to put the king. Will we see white's queen step up the board, or will white stop that black pawn from advancing even further? He does. He prevents any potential annoyances against that white knight.
Yeah, I think that the two moves will interchange. So I suspect that the most logical move is actually to develop the light squared bishop, move it to the long diagonal, and then Magnus will actually step forward with his queen.
Yep, that's quite likely, Jovanka. And meanwhile, black just needs to focus on development. He will move a bishop. He will move a knight. The black king probably not going to declare its intentions anytime soon.
No. And whilst Artemiev is pausing for thought, we should go back to our quiz of the day. You know? Where we
They interrupted us.
I know. I know. We had 5 minutes to spare. Okay, the bishop has developed to its long diagonal, and we're expecting Magnus to step forward with the queen. So we're asking, if you had your kingdom, who would be the king and queen? And there you go. Magnus makes the move. Self-learned pianist on Instagram says, I would have Ragnar Lothbrok as my king and Cleopatra as my queen. That duo would be fearless, strategic, and will love taking control of more squares. Certainly seems like it's a duo that will inspire Magnus here in this particular position. And Carlengo Simakoko says, my king and queen, borrowing words from Magnus Carlsen, Magnus developing his knight, I admire what people have done, but not the people themselves. Hence, my favourite player in the past is myself 4 years ago.
Ooh.
I myself, Carlengo, would be the king with Queen Beth Harmon.
Yeah, the fantastic Beth Harmon. It's actually probably like a year ago now that I watched The Queen's Gambit.
Yeah.
Came out in the fall last year.
Feels like yesterday.
Yeah.
It was a year ago, I think.
Yeah, oh, maybe I should rewatch it now.
Yeah.
The Queen's Gambit.
Yes, definitely. That was a lot of fun. Okay, and now Magnus has castled to the long side with his king. And if you two want to enter our quiz of the day, there's still time while this game is in progress. And you can do that by tweeting us using the hashtag #ChessChamps or by going to the Champions Chess Store Instagram page and posting your answer there. One lucky winner will get to win one of these Airthings Wave mini devices, which measures the air quality in your room.
Yep, great prize. All right, and Magnus has moved his king in the previous game, and the game before that we talked about Alice, the A pawn, and talking about Queen's Gambit, the B pawn must be named Beth, right?
Beth,
no other name for
sure.
her. And the black B pawn, the black Beth, is, you know, quite advanced up the board here.
Yeah, and I think Artemiev, one of his main strategies to get to that white king, to break down the protection in front of it, is to advance black's b-pawn, as you mentioned there, Kaya, Beth, the black Beth, to push down the board and just open up some lines. That's the only way you will get to the white king, if you open up more avenues of attack. Magnus Carlsen, for sure, I think his next move, or the move he wants to play, is to shuffle the white king closer towards the corner. We've said that's good strategy when you castle on this long side. And meanwhile, Artemiev, he knows now what Magnus's decision is. Magnus has committed his king, so he knows what he needs to do to attack. The problem for black, however, is that black's king is pretty much stuck in the centre. It can never, ever dream of castling over to that right side now, because if you look at white's queen and dark squared bishop, they're lined up against the pawn on that side of the board. And Kaya, you guessed the move.
Yay!
It's on the board.
These guys are just joining in our storytelling today.
Exactly. It's Beth's turn to shine.
Yes.
And she has pushed forward. This has initiated some real complications. But Artemiev, he needs to go for this type of gamble. If you give Magnus Carlsen too much time to stabilise, there's not much chance you'll be able to create a decisive attack. So he thinks that this is the moment, but it does come with risk.
Yeah, I was just going to say, 2 captures on the board. Which one would you choose? And Magnus has decided for us. Knight takes knight.
Yeah, and there were actually 2 choices there for black on the last turn. Black then didn't necessarily need to capture back that knight. He could have captured the other white knight with Beth, the b-pawn, but after this trade, we do see Magnus go a pawn up. So Beth, just like Anna, just like Alice before her, has sacrificed herself. And now white is a pawn up, but white's structure on this left flank has been compromised. White does have a double Beth situation. These 2 b-pawns, these doubled up pawns and targets, that means for black's pieces.
Yeah.
And black's queen does go across to try and target white's weak pawns on this left side.
OK, and how does Magnus just keep control? Because things are going to get very wild. For instance, I feel that pawn should be defended. The pawn I'm referring to is the b4 pawn.
Yeah, so one thing that Magnus loves to do in all types of positions with this pawn structure is to launch the white knight into the centre of the board. For better or worse, he loves to play that type of move. And if white's knight moves out the way, then the white queen protects along the diagonal that front b-pawn on the left side. So that's the move I expect to see from Magnus Carlsen, but you can maybe be a bit more ambitious as well as move. OK, he's smiling away there. The fact that Magnus is smiling means maybe he's seen something a bit, a bit different, a bit exciting on the board, and that means maybe sacrifices, maybe unexpected moves. For example, White's queen could come up to the centre of the board to defend the pawn along the line. That looks like a type of move that might make Magnus smile. Another one that I would be tempted to play is to push White's pawn in the centre of the board to try and open up lines for White's pieces, and that would lead to real complications as well. Either way, Magnus is having fun. That's what we love to see from any player when they're enjoying their chess, and hopefully that will lead to a real imbalanced fight. Artemiev, he needs to start enjoying this type of position as well, because this is the type of position you need to see the positives. You need to see a way through to your opponent's king. If you're not enjoying the type of position, if you start playing passively, it's going to rebound.
Yeah. I mean, Artemiev now is a dangerous player. He's got nothing to lose. I mean, he's completely reckless because if he draws, that's it. OK, we do have the knight move that you highlighted there. It's his favourite manoeuvre. And I think it looked the most logical. I liked the queen move that you suggested, but it wasn't my instinct, because putting your queen in the eye line of a dark square bishop...
The thing is, you were going for a trade, Ivanka, so I think that would have been quite strong. But
I think so too.
The white pawn push in the centre as well would have been very, very interesting. And now Stockfish, the computer, suggests 3 moves. We see it below the players' cameras. The best move for black isn't necessarily the move Artemiev will want to play. The best move is to actually remove White's centralised knight there, trade it off for the black knight, so black's knight can capture that white knight. But he needs a win, and trades will only make Magnus feel more comfortable.
So, OK, why can't black just step forward with a queen and put extra pressure on the knight?
Yep.
Why is this move so bad?
So that's Stockfish's second suggestion, or it was, until suddenly that queen move, Ivanka, as soon as you mentioned it, disappeared from the top 3 move suggestions. So maybe there was a downside, but we didn't find out. We saw black's bishop instead eliminate that white knight. This wasn't the number 1 suggestion. It wasn't even the number 2 suggestion, but it has meant that black has got some time to advance some pawns.
Yeah, and Artemiev trying to open up lines, and Magnus says no, and now...
It's Anna again.
It's Anna again.
It's Alice.
But this time is Artemiev desperately trying to open up lines, and Magnus now playing a great move. He centralises his bishop, and he does so that it's on the same diagonal as its counterpart, therefore eliminating danger. So the big question for me is, Artemiev has been very forward with his A-pawn. Why not just push her up 1 more square?
Yeah, so let's check out what Artemiev's plan is. And if he's consistent, if he's feeling consistent, he has to go for the white king. Remember, he's delayed castling himself, the black king, because he wanted to use the time instead of preparing his own king safety to go for this white monarch. And now consistent would be to push Alice, to push this A-pawn forward to try and wreck white structure. But I think Magnus is going to be cold-blooded. You could eliminate her. You could eliminate this pawn if you want to be really safe. OK, black meanwhile castling. But I was going to say this theme is going to continue. If Magnus had seen this pawn push forward, maybe he would push his own pawn and then try and blockade Anna with his own king. For example, if the black pawn steps forward, it looks super dangerous, it looks scary, about to become a new queen, but white's king could step forward and guard the promotion square of this pawn. Actually, black's pawn, it has no backup, it's an intruder, and it's just going to drop off the board. I think this was potentially Magnus's idea. This convinced Artemiev to castle his own king. Black now just keeping his king nice and safe, and this idea will remain over the next few turns. And Magnus, I mentioned the king might be the best blockader. He's put his king across. Good strategy again when you cast it on the long side. And now if the pawn pushes forward, Magnus will just block things up, either with a pawn push 1 square or 2 squares. Both seem fine. And next move, use his king as a blockader.
Yeah. And suddenly, just like that, the situation looks incredibly dangerous for Artemiev.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, no attacking pieces, right? This bishop neutralised by white's bishop. The black knight unable to get into the game. The black queen kind of shut out, just staring at some pawns. White has a lot of pawns. Remember, white is a pawn up.
But there's no concrete way to kind of find an avenue for the rook and the queen to get anywhere close to the white king.
If you try and bring the other rook in, look at this pawn structure, Ivanka. these pawns just keeping everything protected, keeping the black major pieces, the queens and rooks, out of the game.
But look how wonderful that light square bishop is, reinforcing that pawn structure. So there's no way that black can even be kind of really revolutionary about it and sacrifice material. I mean, his knight and bishop are just bystanders. And I just feel that once Magnus has consolidated the left side, he has a free hand to do whatever he wants on the right.
Yeah,
and
it's a matter of time before Magnus starts having his own fun by pushing some pawns. And, OK, talking of fun, he is laughing. So
he is having fun.
Let's go back to Magnus. He's going to use this king as a bodyguard. That's a rare scenario, to use a king to blockade the opponent's most dangerous pawn. But either way, it's making Magnus happy. And will that translate into a result? So, OK, that pawn has marched forward. So this is the acid test of White's whole system. We did see White just bypass that pawn and block it up.
And Magnus doing exactly as David indicated, setting up that solid as a rock pawn formation on the light squares. OK, let's put it on our hats and just kind of go desperate times call for desperate measures. Is there any way that Artemiev can try to initiate chaos? Is there some trades or something that he can...
I guess the problem for black is that if the black knight gets greedy and captures White's pawn in the centre of the board, we'll see a trade of bishops and then the white queen and rook would be unleashed. So, yeah, the black knight cannot take any pawns right now. If it retreats, a dark squared bishop's disappearing. I don't think that's going to help black too much. I don't see any way to sacrifice any pieces for any pawns to open up lines. White's king is super safe. It feels like Artemiev, he's shot his shot, right? He's just, he's tried something, it didn't quite work, and now he's stuck in a position that...
I have an idea.
Pretty prospectless.
I agree, it's bad, but I do have an idea. So, OK, White has this beautiful pawn formation on the light squares, and I'm like, why not just try to challenge it? Push your e-pawn one square forward and see how far you can go.
OK.
That's it.
That's it. Yep.
I'm taking it on a moment-by-moment basis.
It makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure it would make Magnus Carlsen tremble too much. I think at the very least, for White, you could just trade off a set of pawns and then just, again, use your king as a blockader, and still it'll take a lot of luck, a lot of skill to manoeuvre pieces towards the white king. But, yeah, maybe that's the best of a bad bunch, Jovanka. I agree.
OK.
We need to undermine White's pawn somehow.
What is the computer saying? So I'm cheating here, trying to look at what the computer assessment is. And it's making random move suggestions, like, for instance, stepping forward with the queen. Another one would be just moving. OK. This one was also that. But what's the point?
I don't see it. I think that White now can just push pawns forward. You mentioned, we mentioned kind of creating that ideal white pawn structure, all the white pawns protecting each other. I just don't see any way to break down those pawns. I think Artemiev's just trying to manoeuvre the black queen to fresher pastures, but there's no way into White's camp. OK, there we go. Magnus has pushed his pawns forward. Look at all those white pawns, all on light squares, all protecting each other. Yep. They're going to be backed up by White's king soon. OK, black has given a check, so the white king in the corner. The white king vulnerable on dark squares, but that's why White's dark square bishop is such a key piece.
And you can even see a scenario where the white queen can actually shift herself 2 squares and just cause lots of problems on the long diagonal. You know, when I think about this position, I think of a voice going slow and steady. Easy does it.
Yeah, he's got 100% control now, Magnus Carlsen, and that's the next step. Slow and steady, control more squares.
But I think Artemiev has to do something out of desperate. And for me, it would be just that try to ramp up the tension just a little bit, accept that the position is lost, but bishop pawn.
Yeah. Black has to push a central pawn because otherwise Magnus is going to continue being happy. You have to destabilize him somehow. You have to break his mood, at least give him something to think about. And, OK, black gets ready to push the pawn you wanted to, Jovanka. He brings his rook across first.
OK.
That makes some sense?
Definitely makes some sense, because now the pawn push will come with some potential extra power. Oh, it's Magnus trying to kill the game. You know, anything that Artemiev is doing, he's saying, I can do better. Yeah,
bringing his last piece to the party.
Yeah.
Sensible stuff. That's why Magnus is so good at speed chess as well as classical, because he plays simple moves.
Pawn takes pawn, rook takes pawn on the board.
So the light square bishop might step out of the way now and try to initiate some rook trades. Remember, if all the pieces come off the board, white has an extra pawn, and not just any old pawn. White's pawn's on the B line. Beth, one of those two Beths, is going to march forward and become a new queen.
And I also have to say, if this ever gets into an endgame, say the queens get traded off, the A pawn, Black's pride and joy, will just simply fall off the board.
Yeah.
And like you said, that B pawn will simply push itself to promotion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Black's pawn is actually a bit of a double agent right now. It looks nice and strong for Black, but it's perfect protection for the white king. Black would far rather just pick up his pawn there, that black A2 pawn, just throw it off the board and say, OK, at least I have an open line for a rook. But no, that black pawn is keeping white's king safe as houses. And Magnus has gone for that idea, Ivanka. He has offered this trade of rooks on the centre, on the E line. Yeah, once rooks come off, Black's losing ammunition. Magnus is slowly just, I mean, this is so thematic. It's just trading pieces when your pawn's up. This is, again, technique that we're taught when we're young. It's hard to put into action sometimes, but we're seeing it from a world champion right now.
OK, so whilst Artemiev is thinking, I do have a question for you, David, from Kyle Akalu, who says, using the 10,000-hour rule, what level would you be in chess after 5,000 hours?
Oh, good question.
Ooh, so if I were a beginner and then study for 5,000 hours? Ooh, that's
Where
a good
should
question.
I be? Because that's Malcolm Gladwell. He says, you should be an
outliers, right? Yeah, it's difficult to say though. I mean, it depends what you spend the 5,000 hours on. I would recommend maybe even 80%, especially the first 5,000 hours. 80% of it should be playing, maybe 20% just studying the games that you have played. And
but maybe also what age you start.
And what age you start,
Because it's easier to learn when you're a kid, right?
No, exactly. And again, it's not about the level. It's about if you think you're improving day by day, hour by hour, then that's enough, right? It doesn't... I mean, nobody should expect themselves to be at 2,000 or 2,400 level or something after 10,000 hours. It's every man for them, or a woman for themselves. It's, as long as you're enjoying the game and trying to improve.
And a question that maybe Kaya can answer. Mehdi Ibrahim asks, where to buy this lovely chess set in front of us?
Actually, this is a Play Magnus chess set, and I am absolutely sure you can buy it online. If you just search for Play Magnus chess sets. And it's very handy because it's all rolled up in a little box, and you can bring it to school or to work or anywhere. So I actually have one at home, and the pieces are very big and nice.
Are they weighted?
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
I have one in my apartment too, Kaya.
Yeah. It's a great chess set. Yes. Okay, we do have some moves in the big final here. Do you think now this will be the final game of the final?
It looks that way, unless Artemiev comes up with a really miraculous resource or tricks Magnus with something really cunning. Black did push a pawn to try and open up some lines, but Magnus is now using his queen to control even more of those dark squares. The only way through to that white king are the dark squares, and you need to get to the king. You're just simply pawns down as Black. So, Magnus just turning the screw, just covering all his weak spots, and Artemiev's position, it's looking dire. I'm struggling to see any counterplay right now for Black. Black's pieces just aren't coordinated as well. Black's rook in the corner, tied down, defending its pawn. Black's queen, not active at all. Black's dark square bishop is actually the one under pressure right now on this dark squared long diagonal.
OK. I agree with absolutely everything you said. But if you
there's
were
always a but, Ivanka.
there's always. Okay. But if you were Artemiev and you need to go into James Bond mode right now to save the day, is this the correct way to initiate some kind of action?
It's difficult because it's just a way up of the odds, right? OK, he's traded rooks meanwhile, because every move looks pretty... I mean, there's no way to save the game, I think, now with Black. You're simply losing. You just have to try and gamble. What will Magnus feel least comfortable with? Where can I set a trap? I don't see any traps right now. I don't see Magnus being uncomfortable, but... Does that mean that this idea is a failure, or does that mean there was just nothing else? I'm not sure.
Well, there's a problem in this position that White is attacking the knight, and Black has been forced onto the defensive to defend this knight. And there's still really unpleasant action on the long diagonal.
OK, but in whose favour, though? Because Black does have some small ideas himself, maybe, at some point.
Highlight us.
I mean, maybe black can hint at some queen sacrifice to get rid of white's dark squared bishop in the centre, just to open up black's dark squared diagonal. I'm not saying there's any concrete threats. I'm not going to say it's going to happen anytime soon. But if black can somehow use the black rook or use the black queen to get rid of white's queen or bishop, then maybe some small chances.
So you see, this was the move that I saw for Magnus. Concrete play, you know.
There's still no threat to win material, Jovanka. So, yes, it's trying to open up this dark square diagonal, but Artemyev's not dead yet. I still think white's completely winning. It's a matter of time, but he couldn't do anything else. There were just no other options.
10 minutes more on the clock for Magnus Carlsen. Artemyev just... I mean, I have to applaud his fighting spirit.
Yeah.
He's not giving up.
This is true. This is true. I mean, he's going to go far, Artemyev. He's already one of the best players in the world, especially at speed chess. But after this pandemic is over, once he starts playing these types of tournaments, you know, on a week-in, week-out basis, then once he conquers his nerves, conquers his time issues, then he's going to be challenging Magnus for years to come.
Wow,
in all time formats.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things about this whole format is that Artemyev gets experience. You know, he was here as a kind of wild card, and then he ended up coming in second place and then third place, and then now challenging again for the first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Meanwhile,
trade of pawns.
Yep. And okay, that was just to stop the advance of white's pawns. I guess nothing else that black could do really. Still, that black rook in the corner, just not active, unfortunately. Okay, Magnus, how is he going to try and clinch this game? The one piece I really love for white is the light squared bishop pointing towards the black king on this diagonal, but I don't see any way to provide kind of support for it to crash through yet. Is it time to push Beth forward? White, remember, has these two doubled pawns on the left side. One of them could start inching towards its end goal, inching towards its promotion square.
That looks like a nice move. I would be tempted to play that move as well. I was also thinking of...
The good thing is, if one of the pawns drops off, you have another one in reserve. That's the beauty of double pawns.
I was also thinking that it could be possible for white to improve the rook and to put it on a more menacing square.
Yeah, it looks great on the open line, but it's hitting thin air, right?
That's true.
Where would you put it, Jovanka? That white rook?
I had options. Just thinking the H line.
Okay, Magnus using brute force instead. I liked your move there, Jovanka, but Magnus giving up a pawn in order to free up another pawn. So if black takes that white pawn, then Gary, the G-pawn, is going to march forward. Gary, brother of Harry.
Yes.
And I was going to say, because it was Freddie Mercury's birthday, should have turned, was it 70?
75.
75. Then, of course, Freddie the F-pawn there. Yeah.
Sacrificed itself, though. And we have seen a queen sacrifice, actually, from Artemyev.
Wow.
He gave up his queen for white's bishop in the centre of the board. He had to. Everything else was losing. But it was only a temporary sacrifice, because now black's knight has jumped out the way.
Oh,
That
David.
is nice by Magnus.
Move.
Black's knight jumped out the way, unleashing the black bishop. Again, it's created a pin against the white queen and king. And you mentioned you got excited here, Jovanka. The bishop took the pawn. Black's king could not capture that bishop because white's rook would have come up and given a deadly check, deflecting the black king away from the defence of its bishop. So Artemyev had to play this move. And now Magnus, so cynical, just trading off the rooks. He's heading for the endgame.
Oh.
This is going to kill, I think, all chances for Artemyev.
Yeah. And after rook takes rook, queen takes bishop. Everything is under control for the world champion. And yes, black has a pass pawn on the F line, but it's going to be nicely controlled by the light square bishop. And it's going to be the B pawn that just wins the game. Nothing, absolutely nothing that Artemyev can do.
Yeah, it looks like Freddie, the F pawn, is marching forward, but the bishop just in time. Only just in time, and that's enough for the world champion. White's bishop doing such a versatile job to stop that black pawn, and Beth is the winner.
Wow.
It's Beth versus Freddie, but Beth's superior here.
Yeah. And less than a minute on the clock for Artemyev. He is about to lose the big final in the Aimchess US Rapid, but he will take a great second place, and that second place will also take him to the tour final. He will be in 8th place overall in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour. He's only played 3 events, Vladislav Artemyev. It's an amazing performance by him to actually be qualified for the tour final. This is his second final. He is definitely one of the players that has impressed us the most.
Yeah.
And these two, they will meet again in that tour final. And even if Artemiev doesn't go on to win it, which is going to be difficult, he will for sure have a big say in who wins the tour final.
And here comes the race of the pawns.
Yep, and notice this last move by White. It has freed up a square for White's bishop to use. So White's bishop will utilise the square that White pawn previously sat on in order to drop back and stop Freddie, the f-pawn. So White's bishop, OK, we won't see it yet, but the White bishop can drop back now, I think.
Yes,
I think. The White pawn can step forward.
I think it's safer just put the bishop to guard the queening square on f1.
Yep. Very, very safe, that last move. If White's bishop does step back, will we see Magnus go for it? I'm trying to look for tricks here, what Artemiev is trying to do with that knight jump. If, for example, White's pawn steps forward, I don't see it, but... yeah, I guess safest, just bring that White bishop back, stop Black's only chance of winning the game, which is that f-pawn.
And Magnus doing the totally right thing. He has 10 minutes on the clock. He can work everything out. So he pushes his pawn, and now I'm going to suspect that Artemiev delivers a check. He takes pawn, and maybe his idea is just to give another check and then guard the pawn. Yeah,
so preventing Beth from getting coronated, from becoming a new queen. But look at White's bishop now. This is what we call the knight stable. We learned from Simon Williams, the Ginger GM, when he was trolling us. Oh, the stable has been broken because White's bishop was previously trapping the Black knight, but Magnus instead thinks it's more important to trap the Black king. This White bishop stepping back, stopping the Black king from advancing. The White bishop also guarding Black's pawn. Artemiev, he's getting ready to resign, I think. He's just plucking up that courage to press the resign button.
60.
Too many pawns for White.
Yep. And Artemiev setting one final trick, which probably doesn't even work. But, OK, Magnus cautiously advancing his king and is headed towards the c6 square, one step closer to the knight. And...
Yeah. White's king, notice how it's staying out of any potential checks. And here I expect to see White... OK.
I thought he was going to move the bishop.
Yeah, White's bishop could move. White's king can now go kind of the long way round to support Beth marching forward. There we go. That pawn is going to become a new queen. It's going to cost Black a knight. And look, White will still have two remaining pawns, Gary and Beth.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just too many pawns here. And Black's pawn under lock and key.
Yeah, I must say, a superb performance from the world champion today.
Yeah, Artemiev, he's done well, but he hasn't really stood a chance, unfortunately. He's tried his best, but it hasn't been enough. And now, look at this. One pawn marches forward, one is blocked, the other goes, and that causes Artemiev to resign.
Magnus Carlsen is the winner of the Aimchess US Rapid, his third tournament victory in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour 2021. A dominant performance here in the final by the world champion. He is looking so sharp, so fierce. Magnus Carlsen before the big tour final that will start in a month. He's going to be by far in the lead in the overall standings. And what a performance in this final game, you guys. Jovanka, what do you think about Magnus Carlsen here?
All I can do is say absolutely wonderful. You know, he was so dominating with the white pieces. You know, I can just say that Artemiev, I'm sorry, he didn't have a chance. No. But, you know, what can I say also about Artemiev? What a brilliant player.
Absolutely. Brilliant performance by Artemiev. But this final game maybe just proved how strong Magnus Carlsen is. David, let's take a look at it.
Yeah, he seems to see everything Magnus Carlsen. There was one moment that Artemiev might have been getting excited. He fought back from a difficult situation. He actually sacrificed his queen in this position for a bishop, forcing White to recapture. And now, after the knight jumped, he thought, oh, I'm winning the queen back. There is a pin on this diagonal. White's queen is destined to drop off for the bishop, but Magnus has spotted he had a winning blow. He could sacrifice his bishop. The whole idea is that if the king takes, he could bring his rook up, deflect away the Black king, and now keep his queen on the board by winning Black's bishop. But after Black's king dodged, he also killed the game with this nice last touch. He gave a check with his rook, eliminating the rooks. And as we saw, after this transition, after a few pieces leaving the board, the bishop simply stopping Black's pawn. This clinched the game.
And we are joined by the winner of the Aimchess US Rapid, Magnus Carlsen. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, Magnus, tell us, what does this tournament victory feel like?
It feels great. It's the first time in like ever that I've won one of these tournaments, and it's been fairly smooth ride. So that feels really good.
Yeah. Has it been your strongest performance overall, tournament-wise, in the tour so far?
Yeah, I would say so for sure. There were some shaky moments here and there, but overall, yeah, I think this is clearly my best.
And then, of course, winning this tournament, you gain another 40 points in the tour standing. So how aware, have you calculated, how aware are you of what that means for you in the tour final?
I know that it means that I'm further ahead than I was, but I think either way, at the moment, Wesley is the only one who's fairly close, and that would have been the same, regardless of whether I won this tournament or not. But yeah, it's obviously very nice to have that little cushion and to equalize the number of tournament wins that he has in this tour.
Yeah. So you now have 78 points more than Wesley. Probably will start the final with 4 more bonus points than him. And also thinking about the way you're playing now, how confident will you head into that tour final?
No, I'm feeling good. Obviously, generally, I'm not sure that I'm playing so much better, but I'm at least playing quicker and more confidently. So that's helping a bit.
And Magnus, first of all, congratulations. We also know that the World Championship is on the horizon in a couple of months. How much of preparations for that match helped your play in this tournament?
I'm not sure about that, to be honest, but maybe the World Cup helped a bit in gaining me some confidence. But in terms of World Championship prep, I'm not so sure.
Yeah. Well, heading into Norway Chess, of course, in, 2 days that starts? Busy schedule for you. So how do you feel about your form now going into an over-the-board tournament again?
No, it feels good. So I'm hoping to be able to continue the positive trend of the last couple of tournaments. Yes, as you say, it's busy, but it's been a couple of 1.5 not so busy years. So I don't mind that.
Well, are you anxious to face Janne Pomniachtchi in Norway Chess? I have to ask.
I'm not sure if I'm anxious. I haven't thought about that too much. But I'm excited to play a big tournament. That's for sure.
And I also want to ask you about your opponent in the final here, Magnus. Vladislav Artemiev playing his second final here, only his 3rd tournament, and he is ready to play the tour final. So what do you expect he's only 23, from Artemiev in the future?
I think, as I talked about earlier, his natural talent is undeniable, and that's why he does so well. And I think for him to make further steps, he has to have even better openings, and I think he knows that. But yeah, I think once he can fix that, he can go very far.
And today's games, Magnus, was there any moment that you were worried, or you thought it was under control the whole time?
No, I was pretty sure I was going to lose the second game, to be honest.
Why? Or when, maybe?
Well, I would say pretty early on, since I'd completely missed his idea of just going a5 and giving up the pawn. Since I had this weird idea that I was gonna, I sort of brought the wrong rook to attack his pawn, because I had this idea that I was gonna bring the rook that I brought, and then I was gonna grab the pawn on d3, like king g2, and I was gonna grab the pawn on d3, queen b3, and then I was gonna drop back with the queen, and then if he goes queen b3, obviously, I mean, knight d4 wins, which I only saw later. But just to explain the rationale between with the move of rook d8 is that I wanted to drop the queen back to d7, and then after I taken the pawn.
Okay.
And then when the queen moves, go back with the queen, and then I have a nice square in c8. Otherwise, the rook would be locked in. But that was really, really dumb, because this is like one concrete line that wasn't forced at all. And in all the other lines, the rook is just so much better. On a8, for instance, if he goes a5 like he does in the game, if I bring the other rook, then I can go knight d5 maybe. And I have ideas of going b5 and freeing my game a bit there. So, after he found this idea with a5, I sort of realized that my position was pretty bad, and I decided just to bite the bullet and take a pawn. But realistically, I don't think I should have held there in practice. But he spends a lot of time, and if you encounter surprises when you're low on time, things can go astray. So I was just trying to hold, not giving him anything too forced, and pounce when I had a chance. Fortunately.
Yeah, and it was a draw and 4 great wins in the final, Magnus. So thanks so much for all the entertainment in this tournament, and congratulations again.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, the winner of the Aimchess US Rapid. And we're also joined by number 2 in the tournament, Vladislav Artemiev. I'm going to say congratulations on a great second place. How do you feel now?
Hello to everyone. Of course, I lost my final match, but still it's logical, because Magnus played good, and I think that I not have chances in these matches, if true. About last game, I played very risky probably, but I missed his idea with bishop d4, and that after a3 he can play b3 and stop at my pawn, and without real counterplay for black. Of course, I missed it, and after this, probably white is completely winning. And of course, also I missed his move bishop f7. In this moment, I think that it's draw, but after bishop f7, I lost again, and okay, it's finished. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess this was a key moment, and you mentioned after bishop takes f7, just no more chances, right? Magnus spotting all of this from afar.
Yes, it's also very bad for me that white have move b6 later, because if bishop c6, for example, I think that it's draw, because I can go f3, f4, and tempo knight e3 probably after bishop g2, and maybe it's draw. I think maybe.
Well,
because after bishop h3, knight d5 maybe, and not king a2, knight c3 check. Maybe, but still bishop f1, king g6. I don't know, but some chances on the draw.
Yeah,
exactly.
Difficult position.
Definitely. And we did have, of course, Magnus here. He was really complimenting you on the player you are, Vladislav, and also talking about maybe working on openings and time management in the future. Is that exactly what is your focus going forward now?
Yes, I think that I must to improve my opening preparation with black and white also, because I feel that my opening level not enough for best players maybe. So I have paths where I can to be better, or of course, and I will see. Maybe I will have this work. Why not?
And of course, you have qualified for the tour final. This is only your 3rd event, and you have been able to gather up points to play the tour final. How happy are you about that?
Of course, I'm very happy, because it will be a very great tournament. Only strong players, chess masters, and it will be very good lessons for me. And I planning beat some guys, of course, if possible. And of course, I will to prepare with opponent also. And it big result for me, I think, because of course I lost to Carlsen, but it happens. It's not. It's usual, yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to ask, so congratulations for qualifying for the tour final and finishing in second place. So I was just wondering, how long does it take for you to prepare for an event like this?
Thank you for congrats. I think that I start training when I was a child, and it's a big way for me. But for example, when you play a tournament like this, usually about me, I start to prepare when we have second match. I speak about good preparation, yes. Because first match it's like training, maybe not training, but you watch what can do your opponent and what is your possibilities.
Of course.
It's my opinion.
Yeah. Well, Vladislav, I'm going to say congratulations again on second place, and we're looking forward to see you in the tour final.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, and have a good evening.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you. Vladislav Artemyev taking second place here in the Aimchess US Rapid, the final regular event before the big tour final. They have had great tournaments, both Magnus Carlsen and Artemyev. Artemyev winning the preliminaries, Magnus Carlsen in second, and in the quarterfinals, Carlsen knocked out Jan-Christoph Duda. Vladislav Artemyev knocked out Lenia Dominguez. Heading into semi-finals, it was a great fight going all the way to Armageddon with Artemyev and Alireza Firouzja. The Russian did win the Armageddon. And Magnus Carlsen, he knocked out Levon Aronian in also a fantastic semi-final match. In the final, although Magnus Carlsen winning both the first and the second match to be the winner of the Aimchess US Rapid. And third place went to Levon Aronian. But Magnus Carlsen, the winner, his third tournament victory on the tour. David, how impressed have you been with Magnus?
Yeah, very impressed. It seems like he's getting better and better as the tour has gone on. It feels like his preparations for the World Championship, he might deny it, but they have been helping, and it just feels like he's just getting in the zone. He's just working on his chess, and it's all paying off.
And now, let's take a look at the overall standings in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour. This is the situation before the big $300,000 tour final. Magnus Carlsen will head into the final with 339 points. That's 78 points more than Wesley. So Levon Aronian will head in as number 3. Timur Rajabov and Anish Giri both won major events and also are well placed on the table. Janne Pomniachtchi is inside top 8. Hikaru Nakamura is inside top 8, and eventually Vladislav Artemyev did make it through. So these 8 players are invited to the tour final, and then there was also be 2 wild cards. And yeah, Ivanka, Magnus heading into the final with probably 4 bonus points more than Wesley. So how big of an advantage is that?
There are a lot of points up for grabs in the tour finals, but it is a little bit of an advantage. And this is something that Wesley So will have to bear in mind if he wants to chase Magnus down. So we might see that when it comes to points, it actually impacts on players' strategies.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And Magnus Carlsen is the winner of this tournament. And who is the winner of the question of today?
Yeah, so we had a very exciting quiz of the day where we were asking, if you had your own kingdom, who would be your king and queen? And the winner is Nasri Nesnaz, who says, I would have taken Freddie Mercury, whose 75th birthday would have been today. He is both the king, champion of the world with his iconic voice, and he is most certainly queen.
Fantastic.
So, Nasri, congratulations. You are the winner of this Airthings Wave mini device. And wow, I love that answer.
Congratulations. And after 81 days in the studio, only 9 days left, you guys.
Yeah, it's going to be an emotional final, I think, for everyone. It's been such a roller coaster, all of these events, and the players, it feels like they're rewarding us for our patience as well with so many exciting games. Can't wait for the final.
Can't wait for the big $300,000 tour final. It starts on September 25th. Magnus Carlsen will head into it as the leader of the tour. He is also the winner of the Aimchess US Rapid. Congratulations to the world champion. We hope you guys will be back with us for the dramatic tour final. In the meantime, we wish you a great month.